in a state of confusion. A piece of pottery shows up where it shouldn't exist. A metal tool appears to be far older than its time. An inscription carries details that seem far too modern for the historical era it's supposed to belong to. They feel like stray puzzle pieces in a picture that's already been carefully arranged, forcing us to ask a bigger question. Is the history we've been looking at really complete? Mainstream science usually chooses silence, or, when it doesn't, it brushes these things aside with labels like irrelevant, unverified, or even a hoax. Yet the closer we look at these forgotten pieces, the stronger the sense becomes that what's been ignored might actually be the key to unlocking a very different picture, a version of human history, unlike the one we've always been taught. And when we brush the dust of time off these impossible discoveries, the real question isn't just who made them or when they came into being. The deeper, harder question is this: why were they hidden? Could it be that another history, another memory of humanity, still lies asleep in the shadows of the past, a history we may not yet be ready to face? When we start tracing the stray puzzle pieces of history, it's impossible to ignore one of the strangest discoveries in modern archaeology. It wasn't a grand statue nor a towering monument. It was nothing more than a corroded chunk of bronze, broken into fragments, pulled up by Greek sponge divers from a shipwreck off the island of Antarctica in 1901. Surrounded by bronze statues, fine pottery, and glittering jewelry, the lump of metal was almost forgotten, because at first glance it seemed unimportant. Yet hidden inside that obscurity was a secret powerful enough to shake our ideas of what ancient people were truly capable of. Scientists call it the Antikythera mechanism. When it was scanned with X-rays and reconstructed through modern imaging, researchers realized the block of metal housed an incredibly intricate system of gears, tiny bronze cogs perfectly aligned, meshed together with the precision of a fine clock. But this was no ordinary timepiece. It was designed to track the movements of the sun, the moon, and even the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks. It could predict eclipses, follow astronomical cycles, and even forecast the schedule of the Olympic Games. What's astonishing is this: to build such a device, its creators would have needed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and metalworking. By conventional history, this kind of precise mechanical engineering shouldn't have existed until medieval Europe, over 1,000 years later. So why was it present around 100 BC? Who possessed the knowledge and skill to create it? And why has only one example ever been found, standing alone like a lonely fragment of Greece's civilization? Some scholars suggest it came from the scientific circles of Alexandria, a hub where Egyptian, Babylonian, and Greek knowledge converged. Figures like Hipparchus or even Archimedes may have laid the foundation for it. Yet even if that's true, the mystery remains. Why don't we see any others? Was there once a whole tradition of building such complex machines, now completely lost? Or was it the work of one solitary genius whose masterpiece sank with the ship, and with it, the memory of his craft? The Antikythera mechanism forces us to rethink the idea of history as linear progress. We tend to imagine technology developing step by step, from simple to complex, but this artifact looks like a misplaced rung on the ladder, proof that ancient people may have reached heights of technical mastery only to lose it, leaving humanity to start again from scratch. History, then, may not be a straight line, but a spiral, rising at times, falling into forgetfulness at others. And perhaps the most revealing part of the story isn't the machine itself, but how modern science reacted to it. At first, it was dismissed as a worthless relic. Decades passed before new technology revealed its true nature. Even now, many scholars prefer the safer explanation that it was a one-off curiosity, a personal marvel, rather than accept the possibility that an entire body of knowledge once existed then vanished from memory. That's why the Antikythera mechanism is more than a machine. It's a mirror reflecting the way we look at the past. We see what fits the story we already know, and we push aside what doesn't. But sometimes it's the very thing pushed aside that holds the key to another door entirely. If the Antikythera mechanism amazes us with its mechanical sophistication far ahead of its time, then thousands of miles away from Greece, another discovery leaves us equally puzzled, though it looks far more humble. Not a system of intricate gears, but a small clay jar less than 6 inches tall. And yet this little jar challenges everything we think we know about ancient technology. The jar was unearthed in 1938 near Baghdad in an area once ruled by the Parthians or perhaps even the Seleucids more than 2,000 years ago. Inside, archaeologists found a copper cylinder sealed with natural asphalt, and inside that cylinder was an iron rod. When researchers experimented by pouring in a mild acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, the jar produced a tiny electric charge around 0.5 to 1 volt. That's why it came to be known by its famous name, the Baghdad battery. The immediate question is, what could people 2 millennia ago have needed a battery for? In mainstream history, the invention of the battery is credited to Alessandro Volta in the 18th century. So how could a device operating on the very same principle appear in Mesopotamia nearly 2,000 years earlier? Some scholars suggest it was used for electroplating, coating jewelry or small statues with thin layers of gold or silver. If true, this might explain the astonishingly flawless craftsmanship found in artifacts from that era. Another theory claims it was used in religious rituals, where small sparks or strange sensations of electricity might have been perceived as divine. Others argue it was nothing more than a storage jar for scrolls or medicine, and the battery function was a coincidence. Yet no matter which theory holds true, one fact cannot be ignored. The Baghdad battery's design perfectly matches that of a primitive power source: a clay jar, a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and an acidic liquid. These are the very same elements at the core of batteries we still use today. It's hard to dismiss that as mere chance. And what's more, it wasn't just one. Several similar jars have been found in the region. Some still sit in the Iraq Museum, though many were lost or damaged during times of war. That raises a bigger question. Could the people of ancient Mesopotamia not only have known about electricity, but also develop practical uses for it, at least in crafts or rituals? If so, then the history of technology we've been taught may be only a condensed version. Because it suggests that humanity may have discovered electricity long ago, only for that knowledge to vanish, forgotten until it was rediscovered thousands of years later. What erased it from memory? War, disaster, or perhaps deliberate suppression? We can't say for sure. But the Baghdad battery forces us to admit history has never been as simple as we like to believe. There's another strange clue. Across different civilizations we find traces that hint at an ancient understanding of invisible forces in nature. In Egypt, the carvings that resemble the Dendera light bulb. In India, ancient texts describing weapons of light. All of them feel like faint echoes of a lost knowledge. The Baghdad battery is just one fragment of that larger picture, where every artifact raises a harder question than the last. And then our gaze slowly shifts upward to the sky, the eternal canvas where humanity has always sought order and meaning. It was in Central Europe that a bronze artifact was unearthed, one that shattered old assumptions about prehistory. The Nebra sky disk, a 3,600-year-old star map, where golden symbols on a greenish-bronze background tell a story of astronomy so sophisticated it still stuns the modern mind. The disk was discovered in 1999 near the town of Nebra, Germany, by looters digging illegally. It's only about 30 centimeters wide, made of bronze with gold inlays decorating its surface. At first glance, it looks like a piece of folk art. But when scientists analyzed it, they realized it wasn't jewelry or a religious token. It was an astronomical chart. On its face, there's a large circle representing the sun, or perhaps the full moon. A slender crescent marks the new moon. Scattered across the disk are 32 small golden dots, stars. Among them is a cluster of 7, arranged just so, perfectly matching the Pleiades constellation, long tied to agricultural calendars across ancient civilizations. Along the edges are 2 golden arcs marking where the sun rises and sets through the changing seasons, a tool for knowing exactly when to plant and when to harvest. What amazed archaeologists most was its accuracy and practicality. This was not a ceremonial luxury item, but a portable astronomical tool, something ancient people could actually use to track the heavens for farming and rituals. To create it required astronomy, mathematics, and metalworking skills few believed could exist in Bronze Age Europe. And so the question arises, who made it? The Nebra sky disk belonged to a community that left behind none of the grand monuments of Egypt or Mesopotamia, yet from this quiet land emerged an artifact that rivaled the achievements of the great civilizations. It shows that astronomical knowledge wasn't confined to empires with palaces and temples. It could spread, carried through trade networks and cultural exchanges we still don't fully understand. The story goes even deeper. Later engravings added to the disk, including a curved mark often called the solar boat, suggest that the artifact was modified and reused across generations. That makes it a memory vessel, a record of shifting beliefs, growing knowledge, and evolving worldviews among ancient people. The Nebra sky disk forces us to rethink what we mean by civilized and primitive. We often assume that only literate societies with towering temples could grasp complex astronomy. But this small bronze disk proves otherwise. Even on the so-called fringes of civilization, there were minds turned toward the heavens, pondering the cosmos and recording it in metal and light. Perhaps this is the deeper message the Nebra sky disk carries. Knowledge is not the exclusive property of great empires. It can bloom anywhere, wherever people lift their eyes to the sky and dare to ask questions. But, like the Antikythera mechanism or the Baghdad battery, that knowledge eventually disappeared, leaving future generations to piece it back together from scattered fragments. And when we place these first 3 fragments side by side, the intricate Greek machine, the clay jar that produced electricity, and the bronze disk that mapped the stars, we begin to see a picture both familiar and unsettling. It seems humanity has reached the threshold of modern science more than once, but each time the door closed again, leaving behind only a few scattered relics for us to rediscover. And those fragments point us further still toward the lost secrets of metallurgy, where Damascus steel once terrified the world with its strength and its mysterious beauty. In human history, few materials carry both the aura of legend and the brutal reality of warfare quite like Damascus steel, the mysterious alloy forged into blades of mesmerizing beauty and almost unmatched strength. The swords of Damascus appeared around the 3rd century and became famous across the Middle East, especially under the Islamic dynasties. During the Crusades, European knights often found themselves terrified by these weapons, slender, elegant blades that could snap heavier European swords in 2. Legends even claimed they were sharp enough to slice a falling hair in mid-air. The swirling, water-like patterns etched into the steel made each blade not just a weapon of war, but a work of art. So what was the secret hidden inside this steel? Modern research has shown that Damascus steel contains microscopic structures resembling carbon nanotubes, something we can barely imagine being produced in the medieval world. To achieve this effect, ancient blacksmiths had to control temperature, alloy composition, and cooling processes with astonishing precision, far beyond ordinary metallurgical practices of their time. In other words, they possessed a knowledge of metallurgy that we still cannot fully replicate today. The irony is that after the 18th century, the art of forging Damascus steel gradually disappeared. One reason may have been the exhaustion of a unique ore from India known as wood steel, or the disruption of trade that carried it. Another possibility is that the secret was passed down orally among only a few generations of smiths, and then faded into silence. What remains are the surviving Damascus blades, mute witnesses to a knowledge that once existed, then vanished without leaving its full explanation. The rise and fall of Damascus steel forces us to face a familiar paradox. Why has humanity reached great technological heights, only to lose them again? Like the Antikythera mechanism or the Baghdad battery, Damascus steel reminds us that knowledge doesn't always move in a straight line of progress. It can blaze brightly in one era, then fade, leaving behind only fragments that astonish us centuries later. Some say it was the mystery itself that gave birth to legends, that the blades were forged in sacred fire, that human blood was mixed into the metal, that the rippling patterns carried the souls of fallen warriors. But once we strip away the myth, we're still left with a pressing historical question. How did blacksmiths thousands of years ago manage to manipulate metal at the nanoscale? Was it a lucky accident, or the trace of a broader, deeper system of knowledge we have yet to uncover? Every time we look at the surviving Damascus blades in museums, it feels like catching a glimpse of light from a buried knowledge. They remind us that history doesn't always move forward in a steady rhythm. Sometimes it's like a song broken by silence, where soaring notes suddenly vanish into quiet. And with that same break in rhythm, in another corner of the ancient world, massive blocks of Egyptian granite reveal marks that leave modern engineers speechless. Deep, spiraling drill holes. Straight, precise, and almost impossible to explain with primitive tools. One can't help but wonder if blacksmiths of old could forge the legendary Damascus steel, might the builders of the pyramids also have possessed a stoneworking technology long since lost? One of the most famous discoveries came from British engineer Flinders Petrie in the late 19th century. While studying Egyptian quarries and ruins, he found several granite cores left behind from drilling. What stunned him wasn't simply that the Egyptians knew how to drill, extraordinary in itself, but the spiral grooves along the cores. They were too uniform, too deep, showing that the drill bit had cut into the granite with remarkable speed and force, creating pressure that copper or flint tools should never have been able to achieve. Modern experiments reveal something striking. To make a hole like that in granite today, even with our technology, we would need industrial diamond-tipped drills powered by electric motors. So how, more than 4,000 years ago, could ancient Egyptian workers have produced similar marks? The mainstream explanation is that they used quartz sand as an abrasive, combined with hollow copper drills and sheer manpower, but many remain unconvinced because the speed and precision of the grooves seem to exceed what hand labor could reasonably achieve. Petrie himself once admitted, "If these marks were made with copper tools, then those tools must have operated on principles unknown to us." And the mystery doesn't stop there. Egypt is full of artifacts that suggest an extraordinary level of precision. Delicate diorite vases, impossibly thin, found in ancient tombs. Granite blocks fitted together so tightly that not even a razor blade can slip between them. All of these point to a level of craftsmanship we struggle to imagine in that time. When placed alongside other anomalies, like Damascus steel or the Antikythera mechanism, Egypt's stonework becomes yet another fragment in the same puzzle. Evidence of knowledge that once existed, then vanished into obscurity. This forces us to ask, perhaps instead of imagining ancient Egypt only as a land of toiling laborers, hauling stones under the lash, we should envision a society capable of inventing far more sophisticated methods. Perhaps the official story, with its emphasis on brute force, has caused us to overlook the possibility that ancient civilizations held technologies that push beyond what we normally allow ourselves to believe. The ancient drill marks in Egypt's hardest stone aren't just feats of engineering, they're reminders that we shouldn't be too quick to assume we've fully understood the past. In those spiraling grooves, we see the touch of skilled hands, of a mind that once mastered even the most stubborn materials and then vanished without leaving the secret behind. And in Egypt's sacred temples, another mystery rises to challenge us. On the walls of Dendera, carvings appear that resemble giant glowing light bulbs complete with what look like electrical cables. Scholars and skeptics alike ask, are these simply religious symbols, or could they be evidence of lost technological knowledge? The question comes naturally, could this be proof that ancient Egyptians once understood electricity, even built devices for illumination, thousands of years before Edison? Some fringe researchers argue yes. To them, the resemblance is uncanny. The shapes look remarkably like early discharge lamps with filaments and a power source. Some even link it to the Baghdad battery, suggesting that if Mesopotamia produced primitive batteries, perhaps Egypt discovered how to turn electricity into light. The Dendera carvings, in their view, are visual testimony of that lost invention. But mainstream Egyptologists see it differently. They explain that the so-called light bulb is actually a depiction of the serpent god Harsuntus emerging from a lotus flower. The serpent is not a filament glowing inside a bulb, but a sacred embodiment of divine power. The cables are nothing more than symbolic motifs, part of Egypt's elaborate religious iconography. In this reading, the carvings are myth and metaphor, not evidence of electrical engineering. So which is it? From a strictly scientific perspective, there is no archaeological evidence that ancient Egypt used electricity or light bulbs. No wires, no lamps, no generators have ever been found. And yet the carvings remain haunting because they look so specific, so eerily similar to a technology we recognize today. Whether coincidence or not, they reveal something profound. In every age, humans try to capture the mysteries of light, the cosmos, and life itself using the imagery most familiar to them. Context adds another layer of intrigue. Egyptian temples and tombs show little to no trace of soot. If torches or oil lamps had been used for illumination, the ceilings and walls should be blackened after thousands of years. Yet in many places they remain clean and polished, as if the light that guided the artists left no smoke at all. This is why the theory of artificial light refuses to fade away. Never proven, but never fully dismissed either. The Dendera light bulbs remind us how blurry the line can be between technology and symbolism. Do we see technology in ancient images simply because we live in a technological age? Or were these carvings echoes of a real knowledge that once existed, hidden inside symbols left behind by ancient hands? That same question grows louder when we turn our eyes across the ocean to the wind-swept high plains of Bolivia, where the massive stones of Puma Punku lie scattered. Here, blocks of andesite and diorite, some weighing tens of tons, were cut, shaped, and joined with a precision that still puzzles modern engineers. Puma Punku, part of the once great Tiwanaku culture more than 1,000 years ago, is another reminder of a stoneworking mystery that defies simple explanation. At first glance, Puma Punku looks like little more than rubble, but on closer inspection the fragments tell a different story, one of extraordinary craftsmanship. The enormous stones were carved with razor-sharp cut grooves that run straight and true, and angles so precise that even with modern measuring tools it's hard to detect any deviation. Some of the blocks are shaped like giant H's with drilled holes and uniform grooves, designed to interlock like colossal pieces of Lego. Even stranger are the tool marks, surfaces that look as if they were sawed, drilled, or milled with industrial machinery. The accuracy is staggering. How could a culture with no iron, no steel, and certainly no mechanical tools achieve such precision? Mainstream archaeology usually falls back on traditional explanations: harder stones used to grind softer ones, sand as an abrasive, and human labor applied on a massive scale. But these theories lose credibility when faced with the sheer perfection of Puma Punku. Experiments with modern hand tools have failed to reproduce the flatness, the parallel cuts, and the exactness found there. Some drill holes cut through andesite with straightness and speed that look eerily like the work of mechanical tools. It raises a simple but unsettling question: are we underestimating the knowledge and abilities of pre-Columbian civilizations? The mystery isn't just about technique, but scale. Puma Punku sits nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, in a barren landscape with no large trees to use as levers and no animals strong enough to haul blocks weighing hundreds of tons. Yet somehow these stones were quarried, transported and assembled with joints so tight they resemble the pieces of a massive puzzle. Did the Tiwanaku people possess methods we've completely forgotten? Unorthodox theories push further, suggesting that they may have used chemical compounds to soften stone, or perhaps had access to mechanical technologies that never made it into our history books. No solid evidence supports these claims yet, but the reality remains: Puma Punku exists, its stones are real, and their precision is undeniable. And for mainstream history, that makes it a thorn in the side, too solid to dismiss, but still impossible to explain with the simple story of primitive tools and brute force. Puma Punku, in many ways, stands as a symbol, a reminder of the gaps in our historical knowledge. It shows us that ancient people, no matter the continent, were capable of achieving technical feats that leave us stunned even today. And perhaps more importantly, it forces us to confront our modern arrogance, the assumption that we alone represent the pinnacle of progress. With that same humility, we turn east to the heart of bustling Delhi, where a strange relic of ancient metallurgy still rises tall, the Iron Pillar of Delhi. Over 7 meters high, weighing more than 6 tons, it was erected in the 4th century CE. And for the past 1,600 years, despite rain, monsoon winds, and the wear of time, it has stood there almost entirely free of rust. This has baffled modern scientists. Iron, under natural conditions, corrodes quickly, especially in humid or salty air. Modern iron structures often begin to deteriorate within decades, yet the Iron Pillar of Delhi has endured for more than 1.5 millenniums, with only a thin protective layer on its surface, keeping it gleaming through the centuries. Recent studies suggest the secret lies in ancient smelting techniques. Indian metalworkers used a method known as forge welding, heating and hammering together smaller lumps of iron until they fused into a single massive column. More remarkably, the iron they used was rich in phosphorus but low in sulfur and manganese. This unusual chemical balance allowed a thin, stable film of oxide to form on the surface, a natural armor that prevents corrosion. It is this self-generating shield that has kept the pillar intact for 16 centuries. But the mystery goes beyond chemistry. The Iron Pillar also proves that Indian blacksmiths had achieved an extraordinary level of metallurgical skill. Forging a single, uniform block of iron weighing 6 tons, without cracking, without structural weakness, required not only chemical mastery, but also precise control of temperature and craftsmanship. This was no accident. It was the product of a long, sophisticated tradition of metalworking at its peak. What's more, even with today's advanced steel technology, scientists still struggle to replicate the exact rust-resistant properties of the Delhi pillar. It seems that the combination of raw materials, ancient methods, and environmental conditions created something truly unique. And like many artifacts of the past, it is more than just technology. It is also a spiritual monument. Originally dedicated to the god Vishnu, the iron pillar was meant to be a timeless axis between heaven and earth, a symbol of eternity standing firm against the passing of time. The iron pillar of Delhi is not just a block of metal standing silently through time. It reminds us that ancient people were far more sophisticated than we often assume. They knew how to extract ore, master fire, and manipulate chemistry to craft a monument that has defied rust for 16 centuries. And as we leave the Indian subcontinent and follow the ancient trade routes across the ocean to South America, we encounter another culture, the Quimbaya of Colombia. Renowned for their exquisite gold craftsmanship more than 1,000 years ago, the Quimbaya left behind masks, jewelry, and small figurines. But among these treasures lies a set of objects that continue to spark debate. The Quimbaya artifacts, tiny figures just a few centimeters long, yet shaped in ways that resemble modern airplanes. These golden figurines feature straight wings, vertical tails, pointed noses with aerodynamic curves, and in some cases details that look like rudders. At first, scholars describe them as stylized depictions of fish or insects, but when placed side by side with models of modern aircraft, the similarity is striking, so much so that they've earned the nickname the Quimbaya airplanes in alternative research circles. The controversy is obvious. Are these shapes just coincidence or evidence that the Quimbaya had once seen or imagined flying machines far beyond the technology of their time? Supporters of the ancient technology idea went further, building scaled-up models of the figurines. When tested in wind tunnels and fitted with small engines, some of these models were actually able to fly, it seems not perfectly, but convincingly enough to fuel the mystery. Did ancient artisans truly observe some kind of flying craft? Mainstream archaeology, of course, takes a different stance. Scholars argue that the figurines are purely artistic, inspired by fish or birds native to the Amazon. The resemblance to airplanes, they say, is nothing more than modern projection, us interpreting ancient art through the lens of our own technological world. After all, the artifacts are only a few centimeters long, and there's no evidence they were ever used for aerodynamic study. Yet what makes the Quimbaya artifacts so fascinating is not only their disputed shape, but the broader question they raise. Why do so many ancient cultures, from Egypt and Mesopotamia to the Americas, leave behind imagery linked to the idea of flight? Winged gods, divine chariots in the sky, and now these airplane-like figures. Was the dream of flight so universal, so deeply rooted in the human imagination, that it appeared everywhere as myth and symbol? Or is there something deeper, a collective memory of something once real, now long vanished? In museums today, the tiny golden Quimbaya figures still sit quietly behind glass, glittering under the lights. Some visitors pass by, dismissing them as mere imagination, while others linger, wondering what inspired an artisan more than 1,000 years ago to craft such shapes. Farther south, across the dry ridges of the Andes in Peru, lie other mysteries. Alongside the giant Nazca lines and the stone walls of Cuzco, researchers uncovered a strange treasure. Thousands of engraved stones etched with images that defy easy explanation. They're known as the Ica stones. These stones, ranging in size from palm-sized pebbles to slabs as large as tables, are carved into glossy black basalt with pale white designs. And the scenes carved into them have puzzled archaeologists for decades. Some show humans riding dinosaurs, Others depict complex surgical procedures. Still others reveal detailed anatomical drawings of the heart, the brain, even sperm cells. Most shocking of all, a few engravings appear to show images that look like they could only have been seen under a microscope. How could a pre-Columbian culture, existing long before the invention of the microscope in the 17th century Europe, have etched such microscopic detail? If it were only coincidence, why do the images align so closely with what modern science has since confirmed? Of course, the controversy is fierce. Many scholars insist the Ica stones are fakes, carved in the 20th century to sell to tourists. Some locals even admitted to producing and selling stones to make a living. But the sheer number of stones, tens of thousands of them, along with their consistent style, fine detail, and natural weathering on many examples, has led some independent researchers to argue that not all of them can be dismissed as modern forgeries. And that's the dilemma. If we accept the Ica stones as authentic, then we must also accept that human history contains chapters of knowledge we've never recorded. A civilization, or at least a group of individuals, may have possessed insights far beyond what we attribute to their time. Yet if we dismiss them all as fakes, we're still left with the puzzle of why thousands of such stones emerged over decades with such refinement and complexity. The Ica stones, then, remain suspended in a grey zone between archaeology and legend. They cannot be officially embraced, yet they refuse to be forgotten. Whether genuine or forged, they confront us with a larger question. Why are humans across every age so deeply obsessed with the idea of seeing ahead, knowing beyond, and holding knowledge out of its time? Perhaps the Ica stones were born of imagination, yet even imagination reveals a longing, humanity's desire to understand the body, the universe, and life itself at a level deeper than the eye can see. And along that same thread of reaching beyond limits, we encounter another relic, this time not carved in stone, but stretched across parchment. It is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral who claimed he compiled it from older sources, some of which he said dated back to antiquity. What makes this map so extraordinary is a detail that still unsettles historians today. It appears to show the coastline of Antarctica in a form seemingly free of ice. The Piri Reis map is famous not only for its age, but for what it portrays. Western Africa, the coastlines of South America, and the Caribbean islands are all depicted with astonishing accuracy for early 16th century European knowledge. Yet the most shocking feature is a southern landmass, which many believe is Antarctica. But Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after Piri Reis put ink to parchment. So how could a map from 1513 already show its outline? Even more puzzling, the map does not depict Antarctica buried under its thick ice sheets. Instead, it shows bare coastlines, suggesting the source material may have come from a time when the continent wasn't frozen over as it is today. Inevitably, theories arose. Some argue that Piri Reis had access to extremely ancient charts, possibly inherited from Greek, Phoenician, or even prehistorical civilizations that once surveyed the globe before the last ice age. Supporters of the lost technology idea link it to periods when Antarctica may have been partially ice-free. If that's the case, whoever created the original maps would have needed astronomical knowledge, seafaring skills, and surveying techniques far beyond what we attribute to the ancient world. Mainstream scholars, however, are more cautious. They suggest that the southern landmass might not be Antarctica at all, but simply an overextended version of South America, caused by limitations in early cartography. Others point out that the Piri Reis map isn't perfectly accurate. Some coastlines are distorted, and that the resemblance to Antarctica could just be coincidental. Yet the mystery remains compelling. In his own notes, Piri Reis wrote that he drew from 20 old charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others from Columbus's own maps. That statement opens the door to a tantalizing possibility, that the admiral was working from sources long since lost, fragments of knowledge stretching much deeper into the past than our official histories admit. What makes the Piri Reis map remarkable is not only its depiction of a continent, but the idea behind it that humanity may have charted the world far earlier than we admit, with tools, skills, and data that official history never recorded. And if someone truly did see Antarctica before it was locked in ice, then we face a daring possibility that our current civilization is not the first to think in terms of globalization. That possibility becomes even harder to dismiss when, only a few decades after Piri Reis, a French scholar named Oronce Finet published a map in 1531. Carved into Renaissance Europe at a time when knowledge was blossoming, this map portrayed a vast southern continent, what appears to be Antarctica, long before the first explorers ever reached its frozen shores. Finet's map shows the southern landmass with striking detail, a broad expanse of land complete with coastlines, bays, islands, and peninsulas. But what astonished modern scholars is the uncanny accuracy. Many of those shorelines align with the true contours of Antarctica, outlines that were not confirmed until the 19th century and were not mapped with precision until radar and satellite surveys in the 20th. So what does this mean? Was Oronce Finet simply imagining a southern landmass following the ancient idea of terra australis incognita, the unknown southern land that many scholars believed must exist to balance the Earth? Or did he, like Piri Reis, draw from older, now lost sources, ancient charts passed down through generations, preserving knowledge from civilizations that may have surveyed Antarctica before it was buried beneath ice? Mainstream historians usually lean toward the first explanation, that the map reflected philosophy more than reality. But the near-perfect overlap with real Antarctic coastlines has always troubled that view. In fact, comparisons between Finet's map and modern radar scans beneath Antarctica's ice have revealed surprising similarities, as if the cartographer had access to data far beyond his time. Which leaves us with a difficult question: how could a 16th century scholar, living centuries before anyone sailed past Antarctica's drifting ice, depict its landmass with such specificity? Was it mere coincidence, or was Finet inheriting a body of knowledge older than Renaissance Europe itself, fragments of a much deeper legacy that our history has chosen to forget? The Oronce Finet map is more than just a piece of old parchment. It reflects a deeper idea, that humanity's geographic history may be far more complex than we've been taught. Perhaps there were civilizations or forgotten sailors who charted the globe long before official records, mapping the world with their own eyes and knowledge, only to be erased by the shadows of time. Out of that silence, more than 200 years later, another map appeared, one that stirred even greater controversy. Drawn in 1737 by French geographer Philippe Buache, it did more than suggest the existence of Antarctica before anyone had set foot there. It hinted at something even stranger, a network of rivers and waterways running across the frozen continent, features that would not be confirmed until the late 20th century with ground-penetrating radar. This is the Buache map, yet another fragment in the puzzle of discoveries that seems centuries ahead of their time. Buache, a respected cartographer of the French Academy of Sciences, relied on ancient records and the prevailing belief that Earth must have a southern continent to maintain balance. On his map, Antarctica is not drawn as a shapeless mass of ice, but as two distinct land masses separated by a large strait, complete with rivers and basins flowing through the interior. What astonished modern researchers is that this layout aligns with what radar surveys later revealed. Antarctica does in fact have hidden valleys, mountains, and ancient river systems buried beneath miles of ice. And so the inevitable question arises, how could Boache have known this in the 18th century when no one had ever reached Antarctica's heart, let alone peered beneath its ice? Was he a visionary who deduced it through genius-level reasoning about geology and hydrology? Or was he working from older, long-lost sources, fragments of knowledge from a civilization that had once seen Antarctica uncovered before it was swallowed by ice? Mainstream scholars insist on the first explanation. They argue Boache simply applied logic. Any massive continent would require rivers to distribute water, so he sketched them in as an educated guess. But the problem is the accuracy. The way Boache divided the landmass and drew its waterways is strikingly close to what modern technology later confirmed. If it was only guesswork, why does it mirror reality so well? The Boache map, like those of Piri-Reis and Oronce-Finet before it, raises a bold possibility that ancient surveys of the entire globe may once have existed, passed down through generations of map-making, eventually reaching European scholars during the Age of Enlightenment. If that idea is true, then the implications are staggering. Some long-lost civilization may have once understood Earth's geography at a level we believe only satellites and modern science could achieve. But traces of this strange geographic knowledge are not confined to the frozen south. On another map, published in 1559 by an Ottoman scholar named Haji Ahmed, something even more astonishing appears: the shape of the Americas drawn with a degree of accuracy that seems impossible for its time. In that era, transoceanic voyages were still in their infancy. Vast stretches of land remained unknown, and yet somehow Ahmed's pen captured a picture of the New World as if it had been known for centuries. This is the mystery of the Haji Ahmed map. What makes the map remarkable is the clarity with which it depicts North and South America as two distinct continents joined by the narrow isthmus of Central America. The eastern coastline of the Americas, and especially the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, is drawn with striking accuracy, despite the fact that Europeans had only just begun to explore those waters. Even more puzzling, the map hints at land on the western side, as though its maker already knew the Pacific coast stretched far beyond the regions reached by early explorers. So where did Haji Ahmed get his information? Some theories suggest that during the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul was a hub of global trade and knowledge. It's possible Ahmed had access to early European maps, or even to secret notes from voyages by Columbus, Magellan, or Vasco da Gama. But other more daring theories propose that his sources reached deeper into antiquity, that fragments of ancient knowledge, preserved and transmitted across cultures, gave him a vision of the world far ahead of his time. Mainstream historians tend to view the Haji Ahmed map as a clever synthesis of the best information available in the 16th century, rather than evidence of some hidden knowledge. They argue that its relative accuracy reflects the growing sophistication of observation, record-keeping, and information exchange of that age. Yet skeptics remain. Certain detail, like the surprisingly correct outline of South America, long before official surveys, seem too precise to be dismissed as coincidence. The hesitation surrounding the Haji Ahmed map leaves it straddling the boundary between science and legend. It can be seen as a brilliant Renaissance achievement, or as a fragment of some much older heritage that the Ottomans preserved and developed by chance. Yet the mystery of ancient maps doesn't end there. While Europe was unfurling its sails across the oceans, scholars on the far side of Asia were creating a cartographic masterpiece of their own. In 1402, Korean scholars produced the Gangnido map, one of the rare surviving artifacts of its kind. What makes it extraordinary is the sheer scope of geography it covers, not only China and the Korean Peninsula, but also India, the Middle East, Africa, and even distant Europe. A map drawn over 6 centuries ago that opens a window onto a world far broader than we once believed people of that time could envision. For a kingdom tucked away in the northeastern corner of Asia, this was a startling achievement. The Kangnido was based on multiple sources: Chinese Yuan dynasty maps, records from Arab merchants, and even Korean voyages abroad. But its expansive worldview continues to puzzle historians today. How could scholars in such a far-off land have drawn a map that captured, with surprising accuracy, the contours of Africa or the lands around the Mediterranean? What stands out most about the Kangnido is its perspective. China and Korea are enlarged and placed at the center, while Europe and Africa are pushed to the edges. Yet despite this distortion of scale, the map clearly reflects an awareness that the world extended far beyond East Asia, reaching westward into vast, unfamiliar lands. It is proof that even centuries before the so-called Age of Exploration, knowledge was constantly moving between East and West, crossing cultural and political boundaries. One especially intriguing detail is the way the map outlines the Arabian Peninsula and parts of East Africa, regions that Europeans would not chart in detail until centuries later. Were Muslim traders, who served as vital links along the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade routes, the ones who carried this knowledge eastward, where Korean scholars wove it into their cartography? Or could there have been an even older source, a global map-making tradition that once flourished, only to fade from recorded history? Scholars often explain the Kangnido map as the result of cultural exchange through trade and diplomacy. But for those who believe in a hidden history of knowledge, it stands as evidence that humanity already had a global vision centuries ago, one that transcended the limits of any single civilization. And when we turn westward, we find yet another controversial piece of the puzzle: the Vinland map, a medieval chart believed by some to show that the Norse had reached the Americas centuries before Columbus set sail in 1492. The map came to light in the mid-20th century when Yale University announced the acquisition of a parchment, supposedly from the 15th century, that depicted a landmass to the west of the Atlantic labeled Vinland. On the map, Vinland sits beside Greenland and is drawn as a long stretch of coastline, strikingly similar to Newfoundland in modern-day Canada. If authentic, this map would overturn the familiar story that Columbus discovered the New World. In truth, Norse sagas and oral traditions had long spoken of Vinland, a fertile land rich with forests and wild grapes, said to have been reached by Leif Erikson and other Vikings around the 11th century. Excavations at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland confirmed the remains of a Norse settlement, lending weight to the legend. But if the Vinland map truly dates to the 15th century, it would suggest that this knowledge still circulated in Europe before Columbus ever departed on his voyage. The controversy, however, has never quieted. Many researchers insist the map is a modern forgery, crafted in the 20th century to spark attention. Some ink analyses revealed chemical compounds inconsistent with medieval writing. Yet supporters of its authenticity point to radiocarbon dating of the parchment itself, which aligns with the 15th century. Amid this debate lies a deeper truth. Regardless of the map's authenticity, archaeology has already confirmed that Norse explorers set foot in North America long before Columbus. That fact alone makes the Vinland map, whether genuine or fabricated, a powerful symbol, a reminder that the history of exploration is not a simple, linear tale beginning with Columbus, but a complex mosaic of journeys, forgotten trails, and rediscovered lands. The Vinland map opens the door to an even deeper question: how much seafaring knowledge has been lost? Voyages that went unrecorded, maps that were hidden or destroyed, and entire networks of exploration erased from history. If the Vikings truly reached America and even documented it, could there once have been a transatlantic trade route in the Middle Ages that we simply no longer remember? Within that current of speculation emerges another curious artifact. A faint echo from forgotten centuries, the Zeno map. Published in the 16th century but said to be based on journeys from the 14th, it not only charts the North Atlantic but also shows vast islands and coastlines that today do not exist at all. The Zeno map is attributed to two Venetian brothers, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, nobles and seafarers who allegedly sailed into the northern seas around 1380. Their map depicts not only Iceland and Greenland but also a number of strange islands. Chief among them is Friesland, a large landmass supposedly lying between Iceland and Greenland, which no explorer has ever been able to find. Alongside it are other phantom lands like Icaria, Estotiland, and Drogeo, names that no longer match any geography we know. What troubles researchers is the detail. Why does the map so carefully illustrate islands and coastlines that simply aren't there? Some scholars argue that the Zeno map may have drawn on earlier sources, preserving distorted echoes of Arctic geography passed down through the ages. Others take a bolder view. Perhaps these islands once did exist, only to vanish through shifts in climate, advancing glaciers, or geological changes that erased them from sight. For centuries, the Zeno map was taken seriously, even used to support the belief that Europeans had knowledge of the North Atlantic long before Columbus. Some claim it may even have influenced explorers like Columbus or Cabot as they ventured west. Yet over time, the academic consensus has shifted toward doubt. Many now see the Zeno map as either a fabrication meant to glorify the Zeno family or a medieval attempt to stitch together rumor, legend, and fragmentary data into a plausible chart of the unknown. Still, the mystery lingers. Whether fraud, mistake, or memory of lost lands, the Zeno map remains a haunting reminder that our maps of the world have never been fixed. They have always been layered with imagination, ambition, and the shadows of what might have been. The Zeno map may be riddled with phantom islands, but it leaves behind a haunting sense of memory, perhaps echoes of lands long vanished, northern Atlantises swallowed by ice or sea, surviving only in rumor and ink. From those fragile fragments of the north, our gaze drifts south and west, to the beating heart of the ancient Mediterranean, cradle of trade, where fleets of merchants and daring sailors once launched into the unknown. And it is here, between the 13th and 16th centuries, that another cartographic enigma emerges, the Portolan charts. These maps were not decorative pieces or symbolic sketches. They were working tools for navigation, and yet their precision is so uncanny that even modern scholars are left astonished. At a time when the magnetic compass was still rare, when reliable marine chronometers had not yet been invented, and when determining longitude was essentially impossible, these maps captured coastlines, ports, and sea routes with a level of accuracy that seems centuries ahead of their time. Portolan charts focused mainly on the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and parts of the Atlantic. Drawn on parchment, they are instantly recognizable by their web of radiating lines, fanning out from compass-like centers, guiding sailors across wind directions and sea lanes. When compared to satellite imagery today, their precision is staggering. Coastlines, harbors, and islands appear with deviations so minor they rival, and in some cases surpass, European maps of the 17th century. So the question hangs in the air: how did they do it? In the 13th century, mariners had no accurate longitude, no advanced astronomical tools, and yet the Portolan charts depict distances and positions between ports with astonishing fidelity. Some historians argue they were compiled from generations of seafaring experience, meticulous logbooks, and shared sailor lore distilled into visual form. But others suspect something deeper, that their accuracy hints at the survival of a far older body of navigational knowledge, one that may predate the Greeks and Romans, handed down in fragments across centuries. Adding to the mystery, certain Portolan charts depict places far beyond the Mediterranean, stretches of the African coast, even Atlantic islands, drawn before official European expeditions ever reached them. Was this the fruit of sheer sailor intuition and incremental exploration? Or do these maps carry echoes of an older, forgotten tradition of global navigation? The Portolan charts remind us that history's maps are not just records of coastlines, they are mirrors of human daring, memory, and the strange possibility that sometimes knowledge arrives before its time. Some scholars have suggested that the Portolan charts may have been based on even older, now lost maps, fragments of a forgotten global knowledge that survive only in mysterious pieces like those of Piri Reis, Oronce Fine, or Huachi. If true, the Portolan maps might be the missing link between ancient wisdom and the Renaissance. But the mystery of maps and cosmic knowledge is not confined to Europe or the polar regions. Across the ocean, deep in the jungles of Central America, another civilization left behind its own baffling legacy of how they saw the world. The Maya, builders of towering step pyramids and radiant cities hidden among the trees, created not just stone monuments, but an astonishingly precise system of astronomical calendars. They tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets with a level of accuracy that seems almost impossible for a people who lived over 1,000 years ago. The Maya developed several calendars, the most famous being the Tzolkin, a ritual calendar of 260 days, and the Hab, a solar calendar of 365 days. By interlocking the two, they formed what's called the calendar round, a cycle of 52 years, central to their religious and social life. But even more impressive was their ability to calculate astronomical events, solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, and especially the movements of the planet Venus. In the Dresden Codex, one of the very few Maya books that survived colonial book burnings, scholars discovered intricate Venus tables. These records track the cycles of Venus with an error margin of barely a single day, even after thousands of years. For the Maya, Venus was not just a distant star in the night sky, it was a cosmic force tied to war, sacrifice, and the rhythm of the universe itself. Modern researchers are left to wonder, how did they do it? Without telescopes, without modern instruments, how could they achieve such accuracy? The most common explanation is patient, generational observation. Centuries of careful record-keeping refined into precise calculations. But others speculate whether the Maya inherited this knowledge from an even older tradition, passed down from civilizations now lost, who once had an intimate understanding of the heavens. Maya astronomy was also embedded in their architecture. Many temples and pyramids were aligned to the sun, so that on solstices or equinoxes, light and shadow performed breathtaking spectacles. At Chichen Itza, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight cascades along the steps of El Castillo to form the image of a great serpent slithering down, the embodiment of the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl. Through this fusion of architecture, religion, and astronomy, the Maya revealed a worldview where the cosmos was not distant or abstract. It was alive, intimately bound to human destiny, and inscribed in both the sky above and the stones beneath their feet. And yet, it is this very paradox that the Maya leave behind for us. Was their mastery of the heavens only the product of centuries of observation, or could it have been the echo of a far older science, one erased by time? That question carries us far from the jungles of Central America across the ocean to another echo of the past. In medieval Europe, When knowledge of the world was still hemmed in by religious belief, people also drew maps, not to navigate seas, but to arrange the universe in a way that made sense to them. Among these were the curious TO maps, a style that appeared as early as the 7th century and remained popular into the 15th. These maps were not navigational tools, they were instead declarations of a world view, where continents, oceans, and faith blended into a symbolic portrait of creation. To modern eyes, a TO map looks almost nonsensical. The world is shown as a circle divided by a T. Asia occupies the top half, while Europe and Africa take the bottom 2 quarters. The O is the encircling ocean, and at the center, more often than not, lies Jerusalem. The map is oriented with east at the top, not north, reflecting not geography but theology, the belief that paradise and the rising sun marked the world's true beginning. By today's scientific standards, the TO map is clearly wrong. It doesn't capture the actual shapes of continents. It has no scale, no coordinates, no attempt at accuracy. Yet to dismiss it as naive is to miss its deeper meaning. The TO map was never meant to be practical. It was meant to be symbolic, a way of expressing the idea that the world itself was sacred order with human history woven into God's design. Geography and theology were not separate disciplines, but 2 halves of the same vision. And here lies the most intriguing part. In some versions, outside the neat circle of the T and the O, there appear strange details, unknown lands, distant islands, and even mythical creatures said to inhabit far-off continents. To us, they may look like pure fantasy. But could they also be faint memories, distorted echoes of voyages never written into official history? Could it be that even in what seems wrong, there linger fragments of lost knowledge? Some scholars argue that even if the medieval TO maps were no more than religious symbols, deep within their simplified circles may still echo older mapping traditions, ancient hides and papyrus scrolls, long lost after the fall of Rome. If so, what appears simple may in truth be a veil covering layers of forgotten complexity. And as we linger on the strange layering of maps, we are drawn to a different kind of evidence, not written on parchment, but entombed beneath the earth itself. On the outskirts of modern Mexico City, under hardened black lava that has sealed it off for thousands of years, lies a city that once thrived as a spiritual and commercial hub, only to vanish from history. This is Cuicuilco, a civilization buried by fire, leaving behind silent rings of stone like the last echo of a forgotten past. Archaeologists believe Cuicuilco emerged around the 8th century BCE, perhaps even earlier than the great Teotihuacan civilization that later rose nearby. At its height, the city may have held tens of thousands of inhabitants, boasting monumental architecture and bustling ceremonial centers. Its most striking feature was the circular pyramid of Cuicuilco, a rare architectural design in Mesoamerica. Built from stacked volcanic stone, it stretched roughly 135 meters across and rose 20 meters high. Unlike the square step pyramids found throughout Mexico, this round design suggested a different cosmology, perhaps tied to cycles of time, the sun, or the eternal motion of the universe. But around 250 BCE, nature sealed Cuicuilco's fate. The nearby Zitl volcano erupted, sending waves of molten lava across the valley. The city was swallowed whole, entombed under layers of rock tens of meters thick. Thousands of people were forced to flee, abandoning the great ceremonial pyramid and the city that had once thrived. In the shadow of this destruction, Teotihuacan would rise to dominance further north, becoming the new heart of Central American civilization. When modern archaeologists uncovered the remains of Cuicuilco, what they found was astonishing. Foundations of carefully planned urban structures, irrigation canals, and pottery and stone artifacts pointing to a sophisticated society far older than once believed. Some radiocarbon dating even suggests Quiquilco's origins may reach back earlier than any other recorded civilization in the Americas, raising the bold possibility that this buried city was one of the region's true cradles of culture. What haunts us most about Quiquilco is not only the moment it vanished, but the silence it left behind in humanity's collective memory. How many other cities, how many civilizations have been buried beneath volcanic ash, swallowed by raging tsunamis, or shaken into ruin by violent earthquakes? Quiquilco, with its round pyramid entombed in lava, stands as a symbol of civilization's fragility, a reminder that a single breath of the earth can sweep away centuries of human achievement. And so our gaze shifts northward across the ocean to the vast grasslands of North America. Along the winding veins of the Mississippi River, a colossal city once rose, only to fade into obscurity. This was Cahokia, an ancient metropolis near present-day St. Louis, a city that rivaled the world's greatest civilizations of its time, but now survives only as silent earthen mounds scattered across the plains. At its peak, between 1050 and 1200 CE, Cahokia flourished as the heart of the Mississippian culture. Its population is estimated to have reached between 20,000 and 40,000, more than medieval London. Few would ever imagine that such a vast urban centre could exist in North America long before Europeans arrived. The city stretched across more than 15 square kilometres, dotted with hundreds of man-made earthen mounds. The largest of these, Monk's Mound, towered over 30 metres high and covered an area far larger than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza. What astonishes researchers today is the city's planning. These mounds were not built haphazardly, but aligned with celestial events, reflecting a deep understanding of the cosmos. One structure, known as Woodhenge, a massive circle of wooden posts, is believed to have been used to track the sunrise on solstices and equinoxes, much like Stonehenge in England. Here, architecture, astronomy, religion, and politics were woven together, transforming Cahokia into a ceremonial, commercial, and political powerhouse unlike anything else in North America. And yet, its golden age was short-lived. Around 1300, Cahokia began to decline. Scholars point to climate change, deforestation, resource depletion, internal strife, or even disease. But strangely, no clear records survive from the native peoples to explain its fall. The city simply vanished from memory, so completely that by the time Europeans set foot in North America, they had no idea such a metropolis had ever existed. It was only in the 19th century, when archaeologists sank their shovels into massive earthen mounds, that the secret of Cahokia slowly came to light. Yet instead of acknowledging that native communities themselves had built such a complex and magnificent city, many Western scholars of the time chose denial. They attributed the mounds to some lost race, or even to extraterrestrials, as if unable to believe that North America once held a civilization equal in grandeur to Egypt or medieval Europe. This refusal left Cahokia with a double legacy, both as proof of indigenous ingenuity and as a cautionary tale of how history sometimes erases what it does not wish to remember. On the other side of the world, during roughly the same ancient era, another mystery was taking shape in South Asia's Indus Valley. More than 4,000 years ago, Mohenjo-Daro stood as one of the greatest cities of antiquity, a marvel of urban planning, complete with underground drainage systems, broad streets laid out like a grid, and multi-story homes. Excavations reveal granaries, public buildings, and a level of organization that seems far ahead of what we usually imagine for prehistoric societies. Yet, like Quiquilco, swallowed by lava, or Cahokia, forgotten in the Mississippi floodplains, Mohenjo-Daro, too, was abandoned suddenly, its baked brick walls left to crack beneath the desert sun, surrounded by questions that remain unanswered. The name Mohenjo-Daro means Mound of the Dead. Founded around 2500 BCE, it was one of the two great centers of the Indus Valley civilization, alongside Harappa. Covering hundreds of hectares, the city featured straight avenues, neatly divided residential blocks, and, most astonishing of all, a sophisticated underground sewage system. This was an achievement that many modern cities would not replicate until thousands of years later. What stunned archaeologists was the uniformity of its design. Streets ran in perfect alignment, wells dotted the neighborhoods, and public baths like the famous Great Bath suggest the city was both a place of ritual and a hub of political and commercial life. No palaces or grand monuments to kings were found, hinting that Mohenjo-Daro may have been a relatively egalitarian society organized around community coordination rather than individual rulers. And then, around 1900 BCE, it all came to an end. The city was gradually abandoned. Its people vanished, leaving behind empty streets, dry canals, and silent courtyards. Why? Scholars have debated for decades. Some point to climate change, with the Indus River shifting its course. Others suggest earthquakes drained the water supply, or devastating floods ruined the infrastructure. Epidemic disease is another possibility, while some theories connect the decline to conflicts with Indo-Aryan migrants moving in from the northwest. The most controversial clue comes from certain skeletons unearthed at the site. Studies in the mid-20th century claimed that some areas showed unusually high radiation levels, leading fringe theorists to suggest that Mohenjo-Daro had been destroyed by an ancient nuclear catastrophe. Though mainstream science has dismissed this idea, it lingers in popular imagination, fueling speculation about lost technologies and forgotten knowledge from humanity's distant past. Whatever the cause may have been, the fall of Mohenjo-Daro leaves us with a haunting question. How could a thriving city vanish almost overnight? Its silent brick streets stand as a reminder of just how fragile civilization truly is. Proof that no city, no matter how powerful, can escape the harsh cycles of history and nature. And yet, while some cities were buried under earth and lava in another corner of the world, an entire structure seems to have been swallowed by the sea, only to resurface thousands of years later before human eyes. That place is Yonaguni, lying beneath the waters off Okinawa, Japan. Deep under the ocean's blue expanse, massive stone formations rise like intricately carved staircases, straight walls, and pathways, features that have sparked fierce debate for decades. Are they the work of human hands, the remains of a forgotten civilization, or are they nothing more than the patient artistry of nature? Yonaguni first came to light in 1986 when a local diver stumbled upon the site. There, about 25 meters below the surface, stretched an enormous formation more than 150 meters long and 40 meters wide. It featured towering steps several meters high, rectangular blocks, corridors, and platforms that looked strikingly like plazas. Some began calling it the Yonaguni Pyramid. What astonished researchers was the regularity of the formations. The steps seemed to lead from one level to the next. The sharp corners and flat surfaces looked uncannily architectural, as though carved deliberately. Some Japanese scholars proposed that Yonaguni might date back more than 10,000 years, to a time when sea levels were lower before the last ice age melt drowned vast tracts of land. If so, Yonaguni could be evidence of a complex society existing long before mainstream history admits. Geologists, however, take a more cautious stance. They argue that Yonaguni is a natural product of sandstone and mudstone, rocks that fracture cleanly along straight lines. Over thousands of years, earthquakes and relentless waves may have sculpted them into forms that only appear man-made. From this view, Yonaguni is simply a natural Stonehenge beneath the sea. And yet, questions remain. If it's purely natural, why do the stones form what look like stairways, avenues descending deeper, or vertical pillars rising like fortress walls? Divers even claim to have seen carvings resembling human faces or animals, though the evidence is still inconclusive. These lingering mysteries keep Yonaguni among the most fascinating enigmas of underwater archaeology. What's striking about Yonaguni is how it echoes local legends. For centuries, the people of Japan and Okinawa have told stories about ancient lands swallowed by the sea. Myths that often find themselves compared to Atlantis, the fabled continent lost beneath the waves. But if the ocean can conceal an entire civilization, could the dry earth do the same? High up on the rugged plateaus of Turkey, buried beneath thousands of years of soil and stone, archaeologists uncovered a discovery so staggering it shook our entire understanding of history. That site is Göbekli Tepe, a stone temple over 11,000 years old, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older even than Stonehenge, standing as a direct challenge to everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. The story began in 1994, when archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his team noticed massive limestone pillars jutting out of the ground. As they dug deeper, a breathtaking picture emerged. Enormous circular enclosures built from towering T-shaped pillars, some rising more than 5 meters high and weighing tens of tons. Many of these stones were intricately carved with animals: lions, bulls, deer, birds, snakes, almost like a living map of the wild world during the Stone Age. What left researchers speechless was the dating. Göbekli Tepe goes back to around 9,600 BCE, nearly 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids and almost 6,000 years before Stonehenge. According to the textbooks, humans at that time were still nomadic hunter-gatherers, without permanent agriculture, cities, or organized religion. Yet here was proof that people had come together to build colossal monuments, moving and arranging massive stones with deliberate design, all for a sacred purpose. Göbekli Tepe poses a question that unsettles mainstream science. What if it wasn't farming that first pushed humans into organized communities, but faith? What if it was spirituality, the need to worship, to gather, to reach beyond the material world, that truly gave birth to civilization? Adding to the mystery, some researchers believe the layout of Göbekli Tepe may align with constellations, particularly Sirius and Cygnus, suggesting it might have been a kind of cosmic instrument thousands of years before recorded astronomy. Though the theory remains debated, it leaves us with profound questions. Who was looking at the stars 11,000 years ago, and how did they etch the heavens into stone with such precision? The deeper we dig, the greater the mystery becomes. After thousands of years in use, Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed. It was deliberately buried by the very people who built it. Why would they do that? Was it to protect the temple? Or was it a way of closing a chapter in human history that had reached its end? The stones remain silent, keeping secrets we may not yet be ready to face. But if Göbekli Tepe stands as one riddle carved into the hills of Turkey, it is not alone. In another corner of the ancient world, far to the south, on what is now the edge of the Sahara Desert, a different community left behind a monument that looks deceptively simple, yet hides astonishing knowledge of the cosmos. This is Nabta Playa, a circle of stones aligned not randomly but in ways that mirror the heavens above. Nabta Playa lies in southern Egypt, close to today's Sudanese border. Around 5,000 to 4,000 BCE, the region wasn't a barren desert, but but a lush savanna dotted with freshwater lakes that sustained pastoral and hunting communities. And there these prehistoric people arranged massive stones, some more than 2 meters tall, into circles and alignments that tracked both the sun and the stars. What shocked researchers was the precision. Certain stones align perfectly with the sunrise at the summer solstice, a key marker for predicting rainfall and planning seasonal migrations for herds. Other alignments appear to point toward the constellation Orion, the same Orion that would later become central to ancient Egyptian religion and the design of the pyramids of Giza. Could it be that Nabta Playa was the seed, the prototype, for Egypt's grand tradition of cosmic temples and celestial architecture? Often called the Stonehenge of Egypt, Nabta Playa actually predates Stonehenge by at least 1,000 years. This raises a profound question. Was astronomical knowledge not the privilege of later city-based civilizations, but something already being observed, measured, and codified by semi-nomadic peoples living close to the rhythms of nature? And yet, just as suddenly as it was created, Nabta Playa was abandoned. As the Sahara grew harsher and drier, its communities moved eastward toward the Nile Valley. But they didn't leave their knowledge behind. They carried with them not only the skills of herding and farming, but also a worldview, a belief in the bond between sky and earth. From these humble stone circles in the desert may have sprung the very foundations of Egyptian religion and astronomy, culminating in the pyramids and temples that still rise along the Nile today. Nabta Playa reminds us that history didn't begin with massive monuments, but with silent stones standing alone in the desert. From the very beginning, humans weren't only concerned with food or shelter. They lifted their eyes to the heavens, searching for harmony with the vast cosmos. That longing etched itself into humanity's collective memory, and sometimes those memories aren't found on the surface of the earth, but lie hidden under layers of soil and water, waiting to be rediscovered. Not far from where the silt-heavy Nile empties into the Mediterranean, archaeologists stumbled upon the remains of a city that had once thrived, only to vanish from maps for more than 1,000 years. This was Heracleion, also known as Thonis, often called the Atlantis of Egypt. A city swallowed by the sea, preserved beneath sand and mud, as though the ocean itself conspired to hide its secrets. Heracleion flourished as an important port around the 8th century BCE. Positioned at the Nile Delta, it was the gateway where ships from across the Mediterranean arrived, trading goods, grain, gold, and offerings. But it was more than just commerce. The city was sacred. It was home to a grand temple of Amun, where pharaohs performed their coronation rites, receiving divine approval before ascending the throne. And yet, despite its status as Egypt's lifeline, Heracleion mysteriously disappeared around the 8th century CE. For centuries, it lived only in scattered references, a vague mention by Herodotus, a line from Strabo. Many dismissed it as myth, a legendary city no more real than Plato's Atlantis. Then in the year 2000, underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio and his team made an astonishing discovery. Beneath the seabed, more than 6 kilometers from the present coastline, they found Heracleion. What they uncovered left the world in awe. Colossal granite statues up to 5 meters tall, toppled columns, gold coins, jewelry, fragments of wooden ships, and inscribed stele recording trade regulations. All of it preserved under the sea for over a millennium, as if time itself had been suspended. Heracleion's demise is now believed to have come from a deadly combination, earthquakes, tsunamis, and liquefaction, when water-saturated soil suddenly loses its solidity and swallows everything built upon it. In one catastrophic moment, the great port of Egypt slid beneath the waves, vanishing into silence. Heracleion gives us the image of a real Atlantis, well, not a myth, but an actual city that once thrived, served as a hub of trade and religion, and then suddenly vanished from the map. It proves that legends of cities swallowed by the sea aren't just imagination, but echoes of a very real fear that the ocean, the giver of life, can also be its destroyer. And when the mud of the Mediterranean closed over Heracleon's secret, our gaze shifts farther beyond Egypt, across the vast ocean where other strange cities also once rose and then disappeared. One of the most mysterious of them is Nan Madol, a ruined complex on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, often called the Venice of the Pacific. Here, hundreds of massive basalt blocks were stacked into a network of canals and structures standing stark against the endless sea. Who built this place? How could they possibly move and assemble stones weighing tens of tons in an era with no metal tools, no wheels, and no modern machinery? The very existence of Nan Madol shakes our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, as if it carries the fingerprints of a forgotten engineering tradition, the mark of a civilization etched into stone and water. Nan Madol is unlike any other city in history. It was built atop a coral reef made up of nearly 100 small artificial islets connected by waterways. On these islets, people erected towering basalt walls arranged in a crisscross pattern like giant logs laid on top of one another, forming palaces, temples, and tombs. Some walls rise over 25 feet high, more than 15 feet thick, with individual stones weighing many tons. The greatest question is how. How did the people of Pohnpei, without iron, without wheels, without draft animals, transport these immense basalt columns from quarries miles away, then float or drag them out to the reef to construct such massive architecture? The stones appear as if they were cut and fitted with incredible precision, making Nan Madol one of the most baffling engineering feats in the world. Local legend tells of two brothers, sorcerers from a distant land, who used magic to make the great stones fly through the air. Of course, science cannot rely on myths, yet the story reflects just how extraordinary the site has always seemed to the islanders themselves. Nan Madol once stood as the seat of power for the Sodalur dynasty, ruling from around the 12th to the 17th century. It was both a political capital and a religious center, where the ruling elite controlled all of Pohnpei. But over time, the Sodalur regime collapsed, and the city of canals slipped into ruin. By the time European ships reached Pohnpei in the 19th century, they found only a city swallowed by jungle, cloaked in moss, and drowned in silence. That haunting image reminds us yet again that even the most dazzling civilizations can fade away, leaving behind ruins that force later generations to wander through the labyrinth of memory. And from that silence, our gaze shifts once more. This time, not to an island in the Pacific, but to the harsh deserts of the American Southwest, where another enigmatic center once beat at the heart of the ancient Pueblo world. Chaco Canyon. Chaco Canyon, located in modern-day New Mexico, reached its height between the 9th and 12th centuries. Here, the Pueblo peoples built monumental structures known as great houses, massive sandstone buildings rising 4 or 5 stories tall, with hundreds of rooms, some complexes holding more than 600 chambers. Chaco was no ordinary settlement. It was a complex city, a hub of population, ritual, and trade on a scale unprecedented in pre-Columbian North America. What astonishes researchers most is the sophistication of its design. The great houses weren't placed at random. They were aligned along axes that corresponded with the sun, the moon, and even constellations. Many scholars believe Chaco Canyon functioned as a kind of giant observatory where the movements of celestial bodies guided both ritual and agriculture. The presence of vast circular pits called kivas dug deep into the earth, added to the mystery, spaces that served both as community centers and sacred ceremonial chambers steeped in spiritual symbolism. But it wasn't just architecture. The road system radiating out from Chaco has baffled historians for decades. Broad avenues, some stretching for dozens of miles in dead straight lines, connected the canyon's core to outlying settlements across the desert. The Pueblo people had no wheels, no horses, yet they built an infrastructure far ahead of its time. These roads may not have been simply for transport. Many believe they carried ritual meaning, sacred pathways that bound human life to the rhythm of the cosmos. Like so many other civilizations, Chaco Canyon eventually fell silent. By the late 12th century, its people began to leave. Prolonged drought may have drained their food and water supplies. Others suggest social tension, internal conflict, or pressure from outside groups. Whatever the cause, their departure left behind empty sandstone walls, silent kivas, and straight roads with no footsteps to follow them. The silence of Chaco Canyon echoes like a warning from the past. Even the mightiest centers of power can vanish when tested by nature and time. And while stone temples in the American desert were fading into sand and wind halfway across the vast Eurasian continent, another mystery lay hidden deep below the surface. In the heart of Cappadocia, Turkey, there rose no towering walls, no mighty citadel above ground. Instead, an entire world had been carved into the earth, a vast underground city known as Derinkuyu, a fortress buried in darkness, as if its builders were hiding from some danger on the surface. Derinkuyu reveals almost nothing above ground. Its entrances are narrow, secretive openings that descend nearly 280 feet into the earth. Below, an astonishing labyrinth unfolds, dozens of levels capable of housing up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. Winding tunnels connect chamber to chamber, living quarters, storage halls, water wells, even communal rooms. All proof of meticulous planning and extraordinary organization. What's most remarkable is the ventilation system. Hundreds of shafts cut through the rock ensured steady airflow, keeping the underground city breathable even if its entrances were sealed. Massive circular stone doors weighing hundreds of pounds could be rolled into place to block passages, transforming Derinkuyu into an impenetrable fortress. This was no temporary refuge. It was a complete city with schools, wine cellars, churches, and even burial chambers. But the great question remains, who built Derinkuyu? The answer is still a mystery. Some theories credit the Phrygians, an Iron Age people of Anatolia, as the first to carve its tunnels. Over centuries, it may have been expanded by Christian communities seeking refuge from invasions and persecution. Yet even so, the sheer scale and engineering of Derinkuyu go far beyond what we'd expect from a shelter. It conjures the image of a society living under the constant shadow of danger, one that chose survival by retreating into the earth itself. Derinkuyu, with its underground labyrinth whispered to have been expanded by unseen hands, leaves us wondering, could some knowledge and constructions belong not to the time they were found in, but to an even deeper past? And when we step out from the heavy darkness of carved limestone, we stumble across a mystery on another continent, one that feels even harder to believe. In South Africa, inside the pyrophyllite mines of Ottosdal, miners uncovered the Klerksdorp spheres, tiny metal orbs, only about 2 to 10 centimeters in size, yet astonishingly round, almost perfectly shaped. Stranger still, many of them bear fine, parallel grooves etched around their surface, so precise they look like the marks of modern machining. But here's the real enigma. These spheres were found buried in rock layers formed 2.8 to 3 billion years ago, a time when, according to science, life on Earth existed only as single-celled microorganisms. The vast gap between that geological age and the level of technology seemingly required to shape these objects has raised an unsettling question. Are we missing an unimaginably ancient chapter of human or non-human history? Naturally, the first question is, if the spheres were embedded in rock 3 billion years old, does that mean they are truly that ancient too? And if so, how could objects so precisely shaped out of metal exist in an era when no civilization should have been around to make them? Mainstream scientists argue they are entirely natural, the product of slow geological processes of crystallization and layering inside the rock. The parallel grooves in this view could have formed from mineral striations or fractures as the material hardened over time. But what keeps sparking debate is their symmetry, the near-perfect spherical shape of many specimens, which is rare in nature. Those who lean toward forbidden archaeology see the Klerksdorp spheres as possible evidence of ancient advanced civilizations, or even extraterrestrial visitors, leaving behind traces billions of years ago. Of course, such claims aren't accepted by mainstream science. Still, the mystery reflects something undeniable. Sometimes nature creates forms so precise, so seemingly engineered, that they push the boundaries of our imagination. The Klerksdorp spheres, with shells harder than steel, sometimes solid metal, other times hollow and filled with a strange fine powder, left both scientists and the curious baffled. Some argue they are nothing more than the byproduct of slow geological processes over billions of years, while others keep asking, could they once have been tools or even remnants of some lost technology? That lingering uncertainty echoes another set of traces, perhaps even more bewildering, found on the other side of the world. Along the Paluxy River in Texas, USA, the limestone riverbed revealed a sight almost too strange to believe. Giant dinosaur tracks running parallel to beat, and in some places overlapping with, footprints shaped like those of humans. This overlap was like a crack in the wall of history, challenging everything we think we know about evolution and extinction timelines. According to modern science, dinosaurs went extinct around 65 million years ago, while anatomically modern humans only appeared a few 100,000 years ago. Between those dates lies a gulf of tens of millions of years, an unbridgeable gap. And yet, the Paluxy footprints seem to press directly on that very foundation. By the 1930s, local collectors and researchers began noticing these odd impressions. Alongside the classic three-toed tracks of theropod dinosaurs were long, narrow imprints with 5 distinct toes, footprints that looked strikingly human. Some even appeared in clear sequences, as though someone had once strolled across wet sand millions of years ago, side by side with dinosaurs. For many who embrace forbidden archaeology, this was proof that humans and dinosaurs coexisted, or that some other kind of civilization walked the earth long before we think. Mainstream science, however, quickly pushed back. Geologists argued that many of the so-called human tracks were actually eroded dinosaur prints, distorted over time. Others were simply natural erosional features. A few cases even turned out to be outright fakes, carved to sell as curiosities to tourists. Still, the controversy didn't end there. Some footprints remained stubbornly unexplained, too proportionate, too consistently aligned to dismiss as pure coincidence. Imaging studies and sediment analysis show that at least a few of these impressions sit in the same rock layers as authentic dinosaur tracks, meaning they fossilized in the same time frame. That doesn't necessarily prove humans walked with dinosaurs, but it does suggest something deeper, that natural history may be far more complex than the neat timelines we're taught in textbooks. Paluxy, in that sense, became a meeting ground between two worlds of thought. On one side, mainstream science working to preserve the established timeline of evolution. On the other, imagination and unanswered doubts about the possibility of forgotten chapters in our history. And it's right in that space of overlap that we encounter yet another set of strange traces, not carved into sandstone like in Texas, but buried deep inside glossy black coal. The fossilized remains of primeval forests compressed over tens of millions of years. Miners in different parts of the world have stumbled upon metallic objects. The most shocking of all, iron nails sealed inside solid coal, their very existence a paradox, as if the mark of some invisible blacksmith had been preserved in stone from an age when, according to conventional knowledge, humans did not yet exist. One of the earliest reports came in the late 19th century. At a coal mine in Illinois, workers uncovered a piece of iron protruding from a lump of unbroken coal. To extract it, they had to split the coal open, and to their astonishment, the nail was fully embedded inside material thought to be tens of millions of years old. Similar accounts would later surface in England, Russia, and South Africa. Nails, bits of metal framework, even small mechanical-looking parts found trapped in ancient seams of coal. If it were all just coincidence, how could human-made metal objects end up inside coal deposits dated to tens, even hundreds of millions of years ago? Could they simply have fallen into cracks in the rock as the mines were forming? An intrusion mistaken for something ancient? Or could these anomalies be fragments of evidence hinting that human history, or at least the presence of some form of technological intelligence, began far earlier than we've been taught? Mainstream science usually offers more grounded explanations. Some argue that nails and other fragments slipped into natural fissures during mining, giving the illusion they were always there. Others suggest exaggeration, misreporting, or simple error in observation. And yet there are cases carefully documented with witnesses describing coal being broken open right before their eyes, revealing a metallic object sealed within. Those are harder to dismiss as mere coincidence. The story of the iron nails in coal sits on that hazy frontier between fact and legend. It evokes the image of those out-of-place artifacts, anomalies that mainstream history struggles to explain. Whether they truly prove the existence of a prehistoric civilization or are simply strange coincidences of nature, their value lies in how they awaken doubt. Perhaps we have only touched the tip of the iceberg called the past, while the deeper mass still lies hidden beneath layers of dust and stone. From those black seams of coal, our gaze is drawn across the world to New England, where a chance explosion in the 19th century shook the entire field of archaeology. In the town of Dorchester, Massachusetts, in 1852, workers blasting through solid granite uncovered an extraordinary object, sealed within rock thought to be over 600 million years old. It came to be known as the Dorchester vessel, a finely crafted metal vase gleaming as if it had stepped out of an age when, according to every official record, human beings did not yet exist. According to a report published in Scientific American in June 1852, the crew detonated a charge of dynamite in a block of granite. When the dust cleared, they found a metal vessel split neatly in half by the blast, its form unmistakable. The vase stood about 12 centimeters high, 17 centimeters across at the base, and 7 centimeters at the rim. Its surface was decorated with intricate floral and vine patterns inlaid with silver. Witnesses swore it had been embedded entirely within the rock, not something that had slipped into a crack. What shocked observers most was the age of the granite itself. Geological estimates placed it in the Precambrian era, some 600 million years ago, long before complex multicellular life had even flourished on Earth. And yet, sealed within, there appeared a crafted object of metal, designed with both function and artistry, as if left behind by an unknown hand. Mainstream science dismissed the finding, Skeptics argued that the workers had been mistaken, that the vase had merely been lodged in a fissure, or that it was a colonial-era artifact of native or early American origin accidentally caught up in the blast. But such explanations rang hollow to those who were there, who insisted the object had emerged from the shattered heart of solid rock itself. For those who lean toward the forbidden archaeology perspective, the Dorchester vessel is one of the clearest examples of a forbidden relic, a crafted artifact locked away in rock far older than humanity. Its elegant patterns show it was not just utilitarian, but cultural, reflecting aesthetic values. And if it truly belongs to an epoch hundreds of millions of years before recorded history, then the story of humankind as we know it may be nothing more than the small, visible tip of a vast and hidden iceberg. Sadly, the Dorchester vessel is no longer preserved in any public museum. Its fate remains a mystery, much like the story of the object itself. Some accounts say it was lost, while others suggest it was quietly locked away in some private archive. There's no direct proof either way, but the story of that little vase lingers like a haunting reminder. What we think of as impossible may once have existed in an age far older than official history is willing to acknowledge. And just as the echoes of Dorchester fade, humanity's curious gaze turns toward the turquoise waters of the Atlantic, where waves break on white sands and coral reefs circle the islands of the Bahamas. There, beneath the shallow waters near Bimini, lies a massive straight line of stone blocks, a structure many believe to be the last surviving trace of the legendary city of Atlantis. In 1968, divers stumbled upon something extraordinary in those waters, huge rectangular limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, laid out in a line stretching nearly a kilometer. They looked exactly like a paved road or perhaps a giant seawall. The precision of their placement, the way the blocks joined together so neatly, made it hard to believe this was nature's random work. The sight alone evoked the image of a monumental human construction now drowned beneath the sea. What deepened the mystery was the timing. Just 2 years earlier, the American mystic Edgar Cayce had famously predicted that the ruins of Atlantis would begin to appear in the Bahamas by the late 1960s. The discovery of the Bimini structure seemed to fulfill his prophecy with eerie precision, fueling belief that this was indeed Atlantis, the fabled civilization said by Plato to have vanished beneath the ocean waves. Scientists, of course, offer a more down-to-earth explanation. Geologists argue that the Bimini blocks are simply a natural formation known as beach rock, created when sand and sediments cement together over time into large slabs, which then crack along straight lines as they erode. The appearance of paving stones and neat joins, they say, is just coincidence. The handiwork of geology, not ancient engineers. Yet for many who have dived among the stones themselves, it's difficult to shake the impression of deliberate design. Some blocks appear carefully cut, and the long, regular alignments resemble the megalithic construction styles seen in ancient cultures on land. Could it be that a prehistoric community once lived in what is now a sunken shore, leaving behind this structure as a fading footprint? The Bimini Road became a meeting place of two worldviews. On one side, strict science with its natural explanations. On the other, imagination and belief that the past still hides chapters we have yet to uncover. Whether truth leans one way or the other, that submerged causeway in the Bahamas continues to fascinate. A reminder that the sea does not only conceal shipwrecks but may also guard fragments of humanity's memory. Yet mysteries are not confined to crystal waters. Some rise above the earth, towering as if to challenge every theory we hold. In the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, enormous stones are stacked to form the foundation of a monumental site. Baalbek. Here, in a land that once nurtured great civilizations before watching them fade, we encounter another riddle of history. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted so precisely together that it's hard to imagine how ancient people could have transported and set them in place. Baalbek was known to the Romans as Heliopolis, the city of the sun. It became a great religious center, home to massive temples dedicated to Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus. But what makes Baalbek so famous is not only the towering Roman columns that still stand, but the foundation blocks beneath them, stones of a size and weight unmatched by any other ancient construction. 3 of these are called the trilithon, each nearly 20 meters long, 4 meters high, and weighing around 800 tons. They are placed so tightly together that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. Nearby, in an ancient quarry, lies another unfinished block known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing about 1,000 tons, along with an even larger block weighing 1,650 tons, the largest known worked stone ever discovered. The question is obvious: how could an ancient civilization possibly quarry, move, and set stones of this magnitude into place when even modern technology struggles with loads of several hundred tons? The Romans certainly mastered advanced building techniques, but did they truly have the means to transport and lift stones of such colossal size? Or do these foundations predate Rome, belonging to an even older civilization whose work the Romans simply built upon? Some scholars suggest the ancients may have used massive pulley systems, wooden scaffolding, and the combined effort of tens of thousands of workers. But modern engineering calculations show that moving a block weighing over 1,000 tons across uneven terrain would be nearly impossible with such rudimentary methods. That's why alternative theories have emerged. Perhaps Baalbek is the legacy of a forgotten civilization, or at least the result of techniques and knowledge we have yet to imagine. Baalbek, with its colossal stones resting in silence for thousands of years, stands like a quiet challenge. It makes us wonder if ancient civilizations truly possessed the knowledge to move and fit stones heavier than anything we can manage today, then how many of their other secrets have been buried by time? And just as we reflect on that grandeur, we stumble upon a paradox of an entirely different kind. Not massive stones weighing thousands of tons, but details so tiny they are barely visible to the human eye. Deep in the frozen soils of Siberia, researchers uncovered minuscule metallic objects coiled into precise spirals, looking uncannily like micro-components of modern electronics. These fragments, some only a few millimeters long, others thinner than a strand of hair, were embedded in soil layers tens of thousands of years old. The discovery raised baffling questions. Were they natural mineral formations or remnants of an ancient technology that once existed on Earth, leaving behind only these faint, haunting traces? The story began in the 1990s when Russian geologists were surveying the Narada, Balbanyu, and Kozhim riverbeds in the Ural Mountains. While examining sediment samples, they stumbled upon metallic, screw-like spirals of astonishing uniformity. Some measured just a few millimeters, while others were so tiny they could only be seen clearly under a microscope. When analyzed, the objects were found to be made mostly of copper and tungsten, metals valued in modern industry for their heat resistance. Their shapes baffled researchers. They looked strikingly similar to miniature components from engines or electronic devices, crafted with a precision hard to reconcile with natural processes. Even more astonishing was the age of the soil in which they were found. Sediment layers at the site dated anywhere from 20,000 to 300,000 years old. If those estimates hold true, these metallic spirals existed at a time when humans were still hunter-gatherers, long before metallurgy, let alone microengineering, was ever conceived. The artifacts were quickly classified as ooparts, out-of-place artifacts, objects that seemed to exist outside their proper time. Theories abounded. Perhaps they were remnants of a long-lost civilization, or even traces of extraterrestrial visitors in Earth's distant past. Mainstream science, however, remains skeptical. Some geologists suggest the coils could be unusual products of natural mineral crystallization, creating spiral shapes that only resemble man-made objects. Others argue that modern contamination during sampling could explain the findings. Yet the consistent geometry and metallic composition of many specimens remain difficult to dismiss entirely. What's fascinating about those tiny Siberian coils is how they open up a much bigger question. If they truly date back hundreds of thousands of years, did humanity miss an entire chapter of technological history? Or do they prove that progress hasn't always been linear, that civilizations may have risen and fallen in cycles, leaving behind only the faintest traces buried deep in frozen soil? That question had barely settled when another mystery surfaced in a very different corner of Asia. In the majestic Qinling Mountains of China, a natural boundary between the north and south and a land steeped in ancient legends, researchers came across something baffling: lead pipes buried deep within earth and stone, appearing in a time when prehistoric humans should have had no knowledge of metallurgy, let alone plumbing. The most famous discovery comes from the Baigong Mountains in Qinghai province, where a rocky peak holds 3 triangular cave openings. Inside those caves, surveyors found countless lead-like pipes, some only a few centimeters wide. Many were embedded directly into the cave walls, others extended deep into the ground, and even pierced through solid rock. Astonishingly, some analyses suggested they could be tens of thousands of years old, far older than the emergence of metalworking in China. Samples taken from the site revealed compositions of iron oxide, silicon dioxide, and calcium oxide, a blend that didn't match any known natural deposits in the area. Some pipes stretched more than a meter long, with surfaces so smooth it seemed impossible they had formed by chance. Even more intriguing, the pipes often appeared arranged in networks, almost like an ancient system designed to channel water or air. As expected, the discovery sparked fierce debate. Some argued these were the remnants of a prehistoric civilization with unknown metallurgical skills. Others took it further, pointing to the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement in Earth's distant past. To them, the orderliness, uniformity, and difficult placement of the pipes made a purely natural explanation hard to swallow. Mainstream science, however, offers a different take. Certain geologists propose that the pipes are actually the result of mineralization, iron-rich groundwater seeping into cracks over time, solidifying into tubular shapes. Another theory suggests they may be fossilized tree roots, gradually replaced by minerals until they resembled metallic pipes. Yet those who have seen them firsthand insist the smoothness, symmetry, and deliberate arrangement feel far too precise to be dismissed as natural. No matter how one explains them, the lead pipes of Qinling and Baigong remain among the most hotly debated discoveries. They force us to ask, if they really were made by human hands, then who crafted them and when? Could there have been prehistoric communities that once held techniques far beyond our imagination, only to vanish into obscurity, leaving behind a few faint traces in the mountains? That ambiguity calls to mind another continent across the globe, South America, where strange stone markings also seem to challenge the boundaries of modern knowledge. Amidst vast mountains and high plateaus, we find the massive blocks of the Inca, the silent stone statues that line the landscape like frozen soldiers, and most mysteriously the carved surfaces that hint at some kind of technology the ancients may once have possessed. In Peru and Bolivia, especially at sites like Ollantaytambo, Pumapunku, and Sacsayhuaman, there are stones as hard as andesite and diorite, cut with astonishing precision. Some surfaces are polished flat, edges perfectly squared, as if shaped by modern industrial saws. What puzzles archaeologists even more, though, are the grooves, drill holes, and cut marks that appear on these stones. There are straight, parallel grooves, so uniform they look as if a massive metal saw blade had sliced through them. There are round holes of identical diameter, with spiral scoring etched along the sides. Marks that look uncannily like those left by mechanical drills. At Puma Punku, some blocks even feature H-shaped channels designed to lock neatly into their neighbors, almost like components from an ancient assembly line. The question is obvious: how did the Inca, or pre-Inca civilizations, produce such markings? According to what we know of history, they had no steel, no mechanical tools, no electricity, no drills. Their known instruments were stone and copper, neither strong enough to carve intricate cuts into andesite, a rock nearly as hard as steel itself. Explanations vary. Some scholars suggest the ancients used sand and water as abrasives, patiently grinding away for months to form grooves. Others propose they used copper saws combined with quartz grit to drill holes. But when faced with the clean, spiral drill marks inside certain holes, many researchers remain unconvinced that such simple methods could account for the precision. For those who lean toward forbidden archaeology, these carvings are evidence of lost knowledge, perhaps a prehistoric civilization that once possessed some form of mechanical technology, or even remnants left behind by beings beyond Earth, as so many indigenous legends still recall. Mainstream science rejects such ideas, of course, yet the silence of those inexplicable cuts continues to speak louder than the explanations. What stands out about the mysterious stone carvings of South America is not just their precision, but the feeling they leave behind for anyone who sees them up close. They look like technological fingerprints pressed into stone, surviving for thousands of years through sun and rain, whispering that humanity may once have held knowledge far beyond what we imagine today. And while those stones stand silently on high plateaus deep underground in a very different part of the world, another baffling discovery has been made. Coal seams, formed millions of years ago, sometimes reveal thin metallic wires embedded inside, as if a hidden hand long ago had left its trace within the black rock. One of the most famous reports came from Donetsk, Ukraine. Miners there uncovered a lump of coal that, when split open, revealed a slender metal wire running right through its structure. The wire was hard, metallic, almost alloy-like, and so firmly embedded that it couldn't possibly have been added later. The problem was the age. That coal was dated to around 300 million years ago, the Carboniferous period, an era of vast primeval forests and giant insects long before any trace of humankind. Similar reports surfaced in the United States, Russia, and China. Miners and collectors occasionally stumbled upon coal that enclosed odd metallic structures, sometimes tiny nails, sometimes slender wires, and in a few cases, geometric shapes. The common thread was always the same. These objects were sealed inside solid coal, impossible to explain, as something that simply fell in later. This raised the unsettling question: were these objects evidence of a lost technological civilization hundreds of millions of years old, an idea mainstream science dismisses immediately? Or are they natural formations we still don't fully understand? Some geologists suggested that the wires could be the product of mineral crystallization, with metal ores compressed under intense heat and pressure into fibrous or vein-like forms that only look man-made. But the problem is that many of these wires are unnaturally straight, uniform, and in some cases show alloy-like properties that nature alone doesn't easily account for. Skeptics argue that some reports may have been misidentified, exaggerated, or even fabricated. Yet even after setting aside the less reliable stories, a handful of these coal-embedded metal artifacts remain preserved in local museums. proof that the phenomenon is real, even if its origin is still wrapped in mystery. What makes the discovery of metallic fibers inside coal so unsettling is how it shakes the very idea of linear history. If metal truly exists in coal dated to 300 million years ago, then we're forced to face two possibilities. Either a civilization far beyond our imagination once existed and vanished without a trace, or nature has ways of shaping metals in complex patterns that we still don't understand. Both options open a door to humility in the face of Earth's deep past. And as those questions remain unresolved, our attention shifts once again, this time to the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean, where a remote island holds another unsolved mystery. That island is Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, famous for its giant moai statues, but also home to something far less visible, Rongorongo, an undeciphered script carved into wooden tablets, as if it were a message from the past that humanity has never been able to fully read. Rongorongo survives on just a handful of artifacts. Small wooden boards, some only a few dozen centimeters long. Carved into them are strange glyphs, human figures, animals, plants, and abstract symbols, all etched with delicate precision. Roughly 24 of these inscribed objects exist today, scattered across museums around the world. And they share one striking feature. The script is written in what's called reverse Boustrophedon. You read one line left to right, then turn the tablet around to read the next line right to left. It's an extraordinarily rare style of writing, proof of a structured system rather than random decoration. If Rongorongo is indeed a true writing system, it would mean that Easter Island once nurtured an independent tradition of literacy, something scholars long denied. Conventional wisdom held that Polynesians who first settled Rapa Nui brought no writing with them, and that the island's society was too small and isolated to invent such a system on its own. Rongorongo, therefore, stands as a direct challenge to that assumption, demanding that we reconsider the creative capacity of its people. But the greatest mystery lies in its content. To this day, no one has successfully deciphered Rongorongo. Some researchers think it encodes religious chants or rituals honoring gods and ancestors. Others suspect it's an astronomical calendar, tracking the moon, sun, and stars with remarkable precision. Still others believe it records the genealogy of chiefs, accounts of lineages, or even the story of the island's decline. But all of this remains speculation. The greatest obstacle is that no living knowledge of Rongorongo survives. After European contact in the 18th century, much of Rapa Nui's indigenous culture was destroyed or eroded. The wooden tablets were burned for firewood, lost, or carried off the island. By the time scholars became seriously interested, the chain of memory had already been broken. A treasure of knowledge had closed forever, leaving only silent symbols carved in wood, a script that speaks but cannot yet be heard. Some look at Rongorongo and see proof that every civilization, no matter how small, yearns to leave behind its voice for the future. Others see it as a kind of linguistic Atlantis, a heritage that never had the chance to speak before being buried in silence. What's certain is this: every carved symbol feels like a doorway, but the key has been lost forever. And that same feeling rises again when we turn to another corner of the ancient world, to the island of Crete, where the brilliant Minoan civilization once flourished. Amidst the palaces of Knossos and their dazzling frescoes, they left behind another unsolved riddle. Linear A, a script that no one has ever been able to read, as if an entire world of meaning still lies hidden behind a veil. Linear A first appeared around 1800 to 1450 BCE. It was inscribed on clay tablets, inventory records, and even pottery. Its symbols, simple lines, curves, and geometric shapes, were arranged in sequences that clearly suggest a complete language system. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of fragments of Linear A in Minoan ruins, yet the words written on them remain out of reach. The greatest obstacle is that Linear A seems unrelated to any known language. When the later Greeks encountered it, they adapted it into Linear B, a script used to record Mycenaean Greek. Linear B was famously deciphered in 1952 by Michael Ventris, unlocking an entire archive of Mycenaean society. But when scholars tried the same approach on Linear A, they hit a dead end. The signs look similar, but the underlying language is entirely different. Some linguists suggest that Linear A might encode a pre-Indo-European language, a linguistic orphan that went extinct without leaving descendants. Others think it could have ties to Semitic languages of the Near East. Still others argue that it was wholly unique, the true independent tongue of the Minoans, a seafaring people who charted their own course in history. But to this day, no single theory has gained universal acceptance. What makes Linear A so compelling is the possibility of what lies locked inside it. Behind those symbols may be a vast archive of knowledge, commercial records of trade, religious texts, myths, rituals. The Minoans were a great maritime civilization with trade networks stretching across the Mediterranean. If Linear A were ever deciphered, we could finally see how they organized their society, what gods they worshipped, and perhaps even why their civilization collapsed in the wake of the Great Thera volcanic eruption. The paradox is striking. We hold thousands of fragments of Linear A, yet remain powerless before them, as if grasping an entire library where every book has been locked shut. Linear A is therefore more than a linguistic puzzle. It is a symbol of the vast silences in history, where the voices of our ancestors echo but cannot be understood. And just as we are left bewildered by those mute signs carved into stone on Crete, another mystery emerges, this time not from rock, but from fragile ancient pages. It is the Book of Enoch, once revered, once considered part of Scripture, only to be cast aside, leaving its ideas to drift at the margins of history, as if deliberately hidden away. The Book of Enoch, also known as 1 Enoch, is thought to have been written between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE. Its central figure is Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, who, according to tradition, walked with God and did not die like other men, but was taken directly into heaven. In this text, Enoch becomes a witness to the secret workings of the cosmos, recording everything from the movements of the stars to the laws of heaven itself. What shocked readers most were the passages about the Watchers, fallen angels who descended to earth, mingled with humans and taught them forbidden knowledge. The art of metallurgy, the making of weapons, the use of cosmetics, even magic. Humanity, armed with power it could not control, fell into violence and corruption. This story has long been tied to the idea of the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Bible. If the canonical Bible is a straight path leading humanity toward salvation, the Book of Enoch feels like a dangerous side road. It suggests that humankind was once entrusted, or burdened, with knowledge beyond its capacity, and suffered divine punishment as a result. Perhaps it was for this reason that when the Church codified Scripture, the Book of Enoch was excluded. Only in the Ethiopian tradition has it remained part of the biblical canon. Yet being cast out only deepened its aura of mystery. Its contents describe a world where the line between divine and human is blurred, where knowledge is not only built slowly over time but can be given, or even stolen. And if that is true, then human history is not simply the story of progress, but also the story of hidden knowledge erased from collective memory. Modern scholars still debate its meaning. Was the Book of Enoch simply a mythological text born from Jewish thought shaped by neighboring cultures? Or could it be a surviving fragment of an even older tradition, a faded memory of events our ancestors once endured? Whatever the truth may be, the Book of Enoch carries a strange magnetism. It reminds us that even at the very foundation of Western civilization, there were writings considered so dangerous they had to be hidden away, and that silence only made them one of the most important unread books in history. But while those ancient pages remain in the shadows, another book in Europe stands openly on display, equally haunting, equally unsettling. This is the Codex Gigas, often called by its chilling nickname, the Devil's Bible, a massive manuscript wrapped in legend, inspiring both fascination and dread. The Codex Gigas was created in the early 13th century, likely in a Benedictine monastery in Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic. The first thing that strikes you is its size, nearly a metre tall, over 20 centimetres thick, weighing around 75 kilograms, with 310 pages made of calfskin. Just preparing the parchment alone would have required the hides of nearly 160 animals. In the entire Middle Ages, no other manuscript approached its scale. Inside, the Codex Gigas contains the complete Latin Vulgate Bible, along with other texts, a history of Bohemia, medical treatises, rituals, even exorcism formulas. But what truly made it infamous is a single full-page illustration, a giant image of Satan with glowing eyes and clawed feet, sitting in an empty space. On the page opposite is a depiction of heaven. That stark contrast led many to believe the Codex Gigas was not just a religious book, but a symbol of the eternal battle between good and evil. The legend of its origin only deepens its mystery. According to the tale, the monk who created it had committed a terrible sin and was sentenced to be walled up alive inside the monastery. To escape his fate, he promised to write a book that would contain all the world's knowledge in a single night. Realizing the task was impossible, he prayed not to God, but to the devil. Satan, the story says, completed the book for him in exchange for his soul. The illustration of the devil within its pages was taken as proof of their pact. Scholars, of course, treat this as legend. Careful study suggests the book was written over decades by a single scribe. Its handwriting remains consistent throughout. And yet, even if we set aside the myth, the Codex Gigas is still baffling. Why would a lone monk dedicate his entire life to copying such a massive work? And why? To people in the Middle Ages, the Codex Gigas might have been an encyclopedia, a collection of religious wisdom, medicine, and history. But over time, it became a symbol of that fragile boundary between sacred knowledge and the pull of darkness. However we explain it, the Codex reminds us of something timeless. Humanity has always been drawn to forbidden knowledge, and in reaching for it, we also confront the deepest fears within ourselves. That same pull surrounds another book, far smaller than the Codex Gigas, but one that has driven scholars mad for centuries. This is the Voynich manuscript, a handwritten book in a language no one has ever managed to decode. The manuscript takes its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased it in Italy in 1912. But carbon dating shows it's much older, dating back to the early 15th century. It contains about 240 pages written on vellum filled with thousands of mysterious characters that don't match any known writing system. At first glance, the Voynich manuscript looks surprisingly structured. The writing isn't random scribbles. It follows patterns, repeats forms, and obeys its own rules. It behaves like a true language. Yet the paradox is clear. It's a language entirely alien, unlike anything humanity has ever recorded. The content only deepens the mystery. One section is filled with botanical drawings, but most of the plants don't exist in reality. Another section shows astronomical diagrams, stars, and strange circular charts. Then there are illustrations of nude women bathing in green pools connected by tubes hinting at some ritual or medical practice, and throughout the book are long passages of undeciphered text, their meaning locked away. For more than a century, countless scholars, linguists, and even expert codebreakers have tried to solve it. At one point, even the US National Security Agency examined the manuscript, but every attempt has ended in failure. Some believe it's an elaborate code written in a cipher that follows rules no one has yet cracked. Others argue it might have been a sophisticated hoax from the Middle Ages, but that explanation has its flaw. After all, why would someone go to the trouble of inventing such a complex system, producing more than 170,000 characters in a script that is consistent and coherent, just for a prank? What makes the Voynich manuscript so fascinating is how it sits on a razor's edge. It could be a genuine storehouse of lost knowledge, medicine, astronomy, botany, or it could be a false door, a maze of symbols that leads nowhere, a mirror of our own inability to comprehend what lies beyond. History holds another text like this, far shorter yet just as impactful. The Tabula Smaragdina, the Emerald Tablet, a work so brief that only a handful of lines survive, but powerful enough to inspire centuries of interpretation. The Emerald Tablet is often said to date back to Greco-Roman antiquity, though legend ties it to someone far older and more mythical, Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek Hermes. According to tradition, his teachings were inscribed on a green tablet of emerald, holding the supreme wisdom of both the universe and humankind. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Emerald Tablet became the very foundation of alchemy. Its lines include perhaps the most famous phrase in the Western esoteric tradition, "As above, so below." These words became the backbone of countless mystical systems. To some, they meant that the heavens and the earth mirror one another. To others, it was a declaration that the human being and the cosmos are reflections. To understand one is to unlock the other. The text also mentions the legendary philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that alchemists believed could transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality. For centuries, scholars and seekers treated the Emerald Tablet like a coded recipe, convinced that its cryptic sentences concealed the ultimate secret of transformation. But perhaps its true power lies elsewhere, not in the literal turning of lead into gold, but in its vision of a universe where everything is connected, from the smallest detail of the human body to the vast order of the stars. That worldview nourished natural philosophy, and in its own way helped lay the groundwork for modern science. And yet one question lingers. Did the Emerald Tablet ever exist as a real slab of emerald, or was it simply a later composition wrapped in legend to grant it authority? The earliest surviving copies are Arabic texts from around the 8th century, later translated into Latin and spread through Europe. The supposed original Emerald Tablet itself has never been found. And so the Tabula Smaragdina became more than just a text. It became a symbol, transmitting not only wisdom but also the human drive to imagine a hidden order of the cosmos. Because it can never be fully grasped, we continue to seek it, reinterpret it, and breathe life into its short lines across centuries. That same impulse, the longing for another layer of truth, surfaces on the other side of the world, in the deserts of Peru, where the mysterious Ica stones raise an even bolder question. Could there exist an entirely different version of human history, one never recorded in our book? The stones came into public attention during the 1960s when Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea, a local physician from the town of Ica, announced that he had collected tens of thousands of engraved stones. The stones, often dark brown or black, bore strange and vivid carvings, scenes of dinosaurs coexisting with humans, depictions of brain surgery, heart transplants, and medical procedures far beyond the reach of ancient knowledge, and even images of spacecraft and astronomical maps. If genuine, the collection would overturn everything we know about human history. Science tells us that dinosaurs vanished tens of millions of years before humans appeared. So how could a stone show a man riding a dinosaur? And if those surgical scenes were based on real practices, then some prehistoric civilization must have possessed medical expertise equal to or greater than ours today. Yet it is precisely this impossible quality that made the Ica stones one of the most hotly contested archaeological enigmas. Many scholars dismissed them outright as fakes, carved with modern tools by locals hoping to sell souvenirs to curious tourists. Some individuals even confessed to producing forged stones on demand. But the paradox is this: Cabrera's collection was massive, more than 15,000 stones, and many of the engravings were so detailed and intricate that it is difficult to believe the entire collection was just a cheap hoax. Between those two extremes lies the grey area of uncertainty. Perhaps most of the stones were indeed carved in the 20th century. But could there exist a core of authentic pieces, a handful of ancient stones whose imagery defies easy explanation? Or perhaps the stones are not ancient at all, but instead a mirror of human longing, the desire to imagine a parallel history, one where we walked alongside giants and wielded knowledge that far surpassed our own. Whether real or fabricated, the Ica stones remind us of something essential. History is not only written in what we dig from the earth, but also in the beliefs and longings of humanity to understand its own origins. Perhaps that same impulse explains why, after leaving behind the strange carved stones of the Peruvian desert, we stumble upon another mystery. This time not etched into rock, but carried in the collective memory of civilizations across the globe. From Mesopotamia to India, from Greece to the lands of the Maya, one story echoes like an ancestral memory engraved into our very psyche. The legend of the Great Flood. If the Ica stones once sparked visions of humans living side by side with dinosaurs, then the flood raises a far larger and more terrifying question. Did humanity once witness a catastrophe of global proportions? Or is this tale nothing more than a shared dream passed down across generations? The Bible gives us the story of Noah, chosen by God to build an ark and save his family and the seeds of life from a deluge that covered the world. But Noah is not alone. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians and Babylonians told of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, who also built a boat, released a dove to search for dry land, and survived a flood that drowned the earth. In India, the legend of Manu tells how the god Vishnu, in the form of a fish, warned him of the coming waters and helped him build a vessel to carry seeds of mankind and animals. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha. The Maya, the Aztecs, the Aboriginal Australians, the Polynesians, and even tribes in Africa all carry stories of a cataclysmic flood. What explains this pattern, this global chorus of the same tale? Perhaps it is coincidence, after all. Floods are among the most universal human experiences, but perhaps hidden within these scattered fragments lies the memory of a real event, the end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago, when glaciers melted and sea levels surged, drowning vast stretches of coastal land. Many researchers believe this period may well be the seed of the Great Flood myth. Other theories go further. They suggest that entire coastal civilizations may have been wiped out, their memories surviving only in oral traditions. If so, then the flood is not just nature's fury, so it may mark a boundary in human history, the dividing line between an old world erased and the birth of a new one. Mainstream science remains cautious. Geological records reveal no evidence of a single flood covering all continents at once. Instead, scholars argue the stories likely arose from devastating regional floods, retold and magnified over centuries. Yet the flood's grip on our imagination has never faded because it touches our deepest fear that one event of nature could erase all traces of civilization. And at the heart of nearly every flood legend lies one recurring detail: humanity is warned, and a chosen few survive to rebuild. Perhaps this is the true meaning of the myth, a timeless symbol of resilience, reminding us that no matter how many times we are swept away, we always begin again. Whether the Great Flood was the memory of a real global disaster or simply a collective reflection of countless local floods, the story holds a special place in our shared imagination. It lingers like a scar in humanity's subconscious, reminding us that history does not always march forward in a straight line. Often, it is broken, erased, and reborn. And in that blur between memory and myth, we begin to see that the gaps in our past are not always carved by nature alone. Sometimes they may have been shaped by human hands. That thought leads us to one of the most controversial theories in modern historical debate: the idea that nearly 3 centuries of European history may have never happened at all. This bold proposal is known as the phantom time hypothesis. The theory was introduced in the 1990s by German historian Heribert Illig. According to him, the years between AD 614 and 911 were either fabricated or heavily inflated by medieval scribes. In other words, rather than living in the 21st century today, Illig argued that we might actually be in the 18th. Illig's argument rests on several peculiarities. First, archaeological evidence from this period seems strikingly scarce compared to the centuries before and after. Fewer buildings, fewer artifacts, fewer traces of cultural development, as if this stretch of time were a historical void. Second, he pointed to the inconsistency and vagueness of written records from the 7th to the 10th centuries. Third, he focused on the reign of Charlemagne, the great emperor celebrated as the father of Europe. Illig suggested that Charlemagne himself may have been a literary invention, a figure created by medieval historians to fill an empty space in the timeline. Illig was not alone. Other scholars have also raised questions about chronology. They noted that when the Julian calendar was reformed into the Gregorian calendar in 1582, only a few days needed to be adjusted, not the hundreds of years that would have been expected if the timeline had been consistently accurate. To them, this was a clue that extra centuries may have been quietly inserted. Mainstream historians, however, strongly reject the hypothesis. Archaeological record, from coins and tombstones to architecture and inscriptions, firmly place the 7th to 10th centuries in reality. Records from the Middle East and China also document events in those same centuries, aligning with Europe's timeline. Astronomers add further weight. Eclipses and comets described during that era match modern calculations perfectly, something nearly impossible to forge retroactively. So why does the idea of phantom centuries continue to fascinate? Perhaps because it touches on one of our deepest fears, that history itself, the very foundation of our identity, might be an illusion. We like to believe time is an unbroken river flowing in one direction. But if even time can be manipulated, extended, or rewritten, then what can we truly hold as certain? Even if it remains a fringe theory, the phantom time hypothesis still lingers in the public imagination. It acts like a mirror reflecting our doubts about those who hold the power to write history. It reminds us that history isn't only about what happened, it's also about how events were recorded, arranged, and retold. And in that gap between lived reality and the official story, questions inevitably arise, questions that refuse to be neatly closed. From that uneasy realization, our gaze shifts once more, not toward the depths of the ocean or the burning deserts, but to the very heart of modern Europe, to a vault of knowledge not buried by nature, but locked away by human hands behind stone walls. This is the Vatican Secret Archives, perhaps the most mysterious library in the world, a place that may hold truths never meant to be revealed to humanity. The archives sit within Vatican City and were formally established in the 17th century, though the documents it holds stretch back over 1,200 years. It's estimated to contain some 85 kilometers of shelving, with tens of millions of documents, letters written by popes, diplomatic treaties, medieval manuscripts. Inside are records tied to Galileo Galilei, the Crusades, the division of the world during the colonial era, even files related to the world wars. The term secret archives doesn't mean secret in the everyday sense. In Latin, secretum means private, but it is precisely that sense of privacy that has fueled endless speculation. Many believe that beyond administrative records, the archives may contain documents never made public, books excluded from the Bible, accounts of philosophers and scientists condemned as heretics, perhaps even evidence of ancient knowledge humanity was deemed unready to handle. Bold questions have been asked. Could there be records of Jesus as a purely historical figure, separate from faith? Could there be documents about prehistoric civilizations, about technologies that vanished, about truths the Church chose to conceal? We can't know for certain. Access is limited to only a small number of approved scholars who are allowed to see just a fraction of the collection. The rest remains locked away, far from public eyes. It is this ambiguity that makes the Vatican archives more than just a library. They have become a symbol, a reminder of the limits placed on human knowledge. Not every truth is ready to be laid bare. Humanity can excavate buried cities, decode ancient maps, or unearth puzzling tools, but some doors remain sealed, their keys held not by time or nature, but by politics, religion, and power. And perhaps that's why the Vatican archives serve as the perfect closing point for tonight's journey. The 49 discoveries before this, in whether real or fake, disputed or confirmed, all point to the same truth. History is far more complicated than the versions we are taught. The locked doors of the Vatican remind us that beyond the pages of our textbooks lies a vast landscape of stories still untold. The journey of forbidden archaeology, 50 discoveries that shouldn't exist, is not simply a catalogue of strange artifacts, mysterious maps, or universal myths. It is a circle, beginning with the question of misplaced pieces in history's puzzle and ending at a vault of knowledge still sealed shut. Along the way, we have confronted the ways history can be forgotten, distorted, buried, or deliberately hidden. And in the end, as we step away from those unopened doors of the Vatican, what lingers is not an answer, but a silence. History, after all, is always the river of memory and power. Some truths are lost, some are hidden, and some still wait to be found. The real question isn't how many truths remain concealed, but whether we, as humanity, are ready to face them.